What if the greatest empires we think we know never actually existed? Scattered through ancient manuscripts, whispered in old legends, and carved into the stones of forgotten places, are accounts of mighty civilizations, so ancient, so vast, that even scholars can't agree if they were real, or just figments of human imagination. Civilizations with no clear origin, no solid proof yet. Tales of their brilliance and power still echo through the ages. Are these the phantoms of long-lost realms, distorted memories of true events, or carefully crafted myths, whispered through folklore meant to inspire, manipulate, or control? Somewhere between myth and memory lie places like Hyperborea, Lemuria, and the land of Shambhala, each shrouded in fog, their footprints faint, their stories eerily consistent across cultures that never met. How could that be? Tonight, we unravel the puzzles of peoples who may have shaped the world without ever having been part of it. Civilizations that defy documentation, societies that might be illusions, or evidence of a far older story humanity has forgotten. So sit back, relax, and let's dive into the haunting enigma of civilizations that might have never existed. High in the snow-covered peaks of the Himalayas, where the wind whispers through ancient stone and the sky seems to press closer to the earth, lies the myth of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom, a place untouched by time. Its name drifts on the lips of Tibetan monks, appears in Sanskrit texts, and echoes faintly through the corridors of Eastern and Western mysticism. No coordinates mark its presence, no ruins have been found. And yet, for centuries, people have searched. Imagine a city of perfect harmony, concealed beyond mountains that shift and valleys that seem to fold in upon themselves. A kingdom ruled not by power or wealth, but by wisdom, where peace is the law and suffering unknown. Ancient texts describe Shambhala as a place of enlightenment, its citizens possessing knowledge and technology far beyond anything known to humanity. The Kalachakra Tantra, one of the foundational scriptures of Tibetan Buddhism, speaks of it not only as a physical location, but as a spiritual realm, a center from which a future savior king, the Kalki, will emerge to restore balance in a world undone by chaos. But is Shambhala a real place? Or is it something else entirely? No maps show its borders. No explorer has returned with proof. Expeditions launched during the colonial era into Central Asia sought it relentlessly. In the 1920s and 30s, even Nazi occultists convinced of its power scoured the Himalayas in hopes of locating it. Russian mystic Nicholas Roerich claimed to receive visions of Shambhala during his travels through Tibet and Mongolia. But nothing concrete ever came of these quests, only more rumors, more fragments, more longing. And yet the myth persists. Why? Some scholars argue that Shambhala was never meant to be found on Earth. They propose it is a metaphor, a representation of an inner state of being, a guidepost on the path to enlightenment. In this interpretation, the mountains are symbolic obstacles. The journey is not outward, but inward. Shambhala, they say, is within. A place of balance we carry in the heart, not in the hands. But that explanation, as elegant as it is, doesn't quite satisfy everyone. Because sometimes, myths behave strangely. They show up where they shouldn't. Stories of hidden kingdoms remarkably similar to Shambhala appear in Chinese, Mongolian, and even Persian traditions. The ancient Chinese spoke of lands to the west, where immortal sages lived in perfect peace. The Persian Avesta describes a place called Varina, a fortress of light, hidden from the corruption of the world. Are these merely cultural echoes of the same spiritual yearning, or signs of something older, deeper, more universal? And then there is the map that should not exist. In 1834, a Jesuit missionary reported seeing a Tibetan scroll depicting a vast circular kingdom, surrounded by concentric rings of mountains and rivers, with a radiant palace at its center. He was told this was Shambhala. The scroll vanished, but others claimed to have seen similar representations, always circular, always radiant, always unreachable. Why do so many ancient sources speak of cities arranged in sacred geometry, hidden in the mountains, beyond ordinary reach? Skeptics, of course, remain unmoved. They point out that Shambhala has never been mentioned in any reliable historical record outside of religious texts and esoteric traditions. They remind us that legends evolve, that symbolic places are often mistaken for literal ones. They argue that the myth of Shambhala is simply a beautiful illusion, a story told to give hope, to explain suffering, to point toward a better world that doesn't yet exist. But if that's all it is, why does it feel so real? Even today, there are those who seek it. Modern travelers, mystics, and spiritual pilgrims still trek through the Himalayas, hoping for a glimpse of the impossible. They follow trails marked by nothing more than intuition and old tales. Some claim to feel a presence in the mountains, something vast, ancient, watching. Some return with strange stories. Most find only silence. And perhaps that's part of the allure. Shambhala is not like Atlantis, swallowed by the sea. It is not a lost city crumbled into the jungle. It is not gone. It is hidden. And the line between hidden and non-existent is thin. So thin it's almost philosophical. Could a place exist, undiscovered for thousands of years, protected by terrain, tradition, and secrecy? Or is Shambhala the name we've given to a longing too large to name? Our wish for a place where the world makes sense? As we peer into the myths and the maps, the scrolls and the silence, one thing becomes clear. Something is calling. Whether it's a real city lost in the folds of forgotten mountains, or a dream seated in the collective human soul, Shambhala endures. Not as proof, but as presence. And maybe, just maybe, that's the point. So we continue the search, not just in valleys and peaks, but in the quiet places of history, memory, and mind. The story of Shambhala is not over. If anything, it's only just beginning. As the legend of Shambhala begins to fade into mist, we drift farther north, beyond the known edges of the ancient world, to a place the Greeks once believed lay at the very roof of the earth. They called it Hyperborea, the land beyond the north wind. In the minds of early Hellenic thinkers, it was a realm untouched by time or sorrow, bathed in perpetual sunlight. Neither winter nor war reached its borders. The people of Hyperborea were said to live 1,000 years in peace and grace, in harmony with nature and the gods. A civilization so pure, so elevated, it was said even Apollo, the god of music, healing, and light, spent his winters there. From this sacred land, the north wind, Boreas, was thought to blow, descending from the unknown with a cold breath that whispered of things just out of reach. But what do we really know about this place? Descriptions of Hyperborea appear in the writings of Herodotus, Pindar, and Pliny the Elder. These were not mythographers. They were historians, poets, and chroniclers. They spoke of the Hyperboreans as a real people, distant, but not divine, human, but exceptional. They were said to send gifts to the shrine of Apollo at Delphi through a chain of neighboring nations, though no Hyperborean was ever seen making the delivery. The offerings simply arrived, passed along by strangers, from a land no one had ever visited. So where was Hyperborea? That question has never had a consistent answer. Some believed it lay far beyond Thrace, in the region of the Danube. Others placed it in the Arctic, or even at the North Pole itself. In the Middle Ages, it migrated to the far reaches of Scandinavia. Later, during the Age of Exploration, cartographers began placing Hyperborea near Greenland, or the icy waters of the Arctic Ocean. Old maps, tinged with speculation, show an island split into 4 quarters by great rivers, clustered around a mountainous central point, an image that eerily mirrors certain sacred geometries from other ancient cultures. But the deeper one looks, the more elusive Hyperborea becomes. There are no ruins, no inscriptions, no burial grounds or architectural remains. Not a single artifact has ever been confidently linked to this so-called perfect society. And the few sources that mention it often do so in passing, in metaphor, or in poetic language. Herodotus, skeptical even in his own time, admits he cannot verify the tales. And yet, he records them anyway. As if to say, this story may be improbable, but it should not be forgotten. Modern historians tend to classify Hyperborea as a myth, a symbolic utopia imagined by the Greeks to reflect their own values in an idealized form. A society of peace and longevity, everything the ancient world was not. But if that were true, why did so many unrelated traditions speak of similar lands? In ancient Hindu cosmology, there is Uttarakuru, a northern continent of blissful immortals. In Zoroastrian texts, the land of Arianam Vaja lies to the north, beyond icy mountains, filled with divine light. Even the Celts spoke of mystical islands far to the northwest, where time stood still. Are these mere coincidences, or fragments of a deeper, older memory? In the 19th and 20th centuries, fringe theorists and esoteric writers began to reimagine Hyperborea as something more than a legend. Some claimed it was the cradle of an advanced prehistoric civilization, wiped out in a cataclysm long before recorded history. Others linked it to Atlantis, or to the lost continent of Lemuria. There were even those who believed Hyperborea was not destroyed at all, but hidden, its survivors retreating beneath the earth or into remote polar regions, preserving knowledge mankind has since forgotten. And then, there's the matter of the pole shift hypothesis, suggesting that the Earth's axis may have shifted in ancient times, moving entire continents and altering climates. Could Hyperborea have once thrived in a temperate Arctic, before a global upheaval buried it under ice? It's an idea dismissed by most scientists, but the thought lingers. The notion that somewhere, beneath the polar ice, lie the ruins of a civilization so old, so enigmatic, that history itself no longer remembers it. Skeptics argue, rightly, that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that in the case of Hyperborea, such evidence simply does not exist. But then, how do we explain the persistence of the myth? Why does it recur across cultures, across centuries, often describing the same peace, the same light, the same unreachable north? Maybe Hyperborea was never a place at all. Maybe it was a direction, a compass of the soul, pointing not to a geographic location, but to a state of being. A dream of harmony projected onto the cold void of the north, where no known empire could survive, and where the imagination is left to wander. Or perhaps there's more to the story. A land lost not to war or disaster, but to the shifting sands of human memory. A civilization so distant in time that its name, its language, and its stones have all been erased, leaving behind only a whisper, carried on the wind, from somewhere beyond Boreas. So, we're left with a question, still open, still waiting. Was Hyperborea a poetic mirage, or the faint echo of a truth we've only begun to glimpse? As the echoes of Hyperborea fade into the cold wind of the far north, we turn our gaze southward, far beyond the equator, to the vast blue wilderness of the Indian Ocean. Here, between the shifting plates of India, Madagascar, and Southeast Asia, lies the phantom memory of another world, Lemuria. There is no island to be seen, no towering ruins rising from the surf, just water, endless, sunlit, and deep. But beneath its surface, something stirs the imagination. In the 19th century, before the theory of plate tectonics transformed how we understand the Earth, scientists puzzled over a strange mystery. How could similar species of lemurs and certain plants be found in both Madagascar and southern India, separated by thousands of kilometers of open sea? The British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed a radical idea. Perhaps, he said, there had once been a landmass, a bridge of Earth that connected the two regions. A sunken continent, long lost beneath the waves. He called it Lemuria, after the lemurs whose curious distribution first raised the question. It was, at the time, a plausible scientific hypothesis, and for a brief moment in academic history, Lemuria seemed real. But as geological science advanced and the mechanisms of continental drift were discovered, the theory fell from favor. The species distribution could be explained by other means: land migration, island hopping, ancient climate shifts. The Earth had changed, yes, but not in the way Lemuria required. There had never been, as far as modern geology could prove, a vanished continent beneath the Indian Ocean. And yet, the idea refused to disappear. Because Lemuria was not only a scientific proposal, it had taken on a mythic life of its own. In the late 1800s, Helena Blavatsky and the founders of the Theosophical Society adopted Lemuria as one of the lost ancient homelands of humanity. They described it as a cradle of early civilization, older than Egypt, older than Sumer, a place where a spiritually advanced race once flourished before being destroyed in a series of cataclysms. In these accounts, the Lemurians were not primitive. They were tall, graceful, telepathic, even luminous. They were said to have lived in harmony with nature, in massive cities built of crystal and light, before a cosmic fall shattered their world and plunged it into the sea. Mainstream science scoffed. No ruins had ever been found. No written language, no tools, no skeletons. There were no fossil layers disrupted in a way that could support the sudden disappearance of such a landmass. No sediment, no smoking gun. But for some, that was part of the allure. Why did so many cultures, they asked, have legends of ancient sunken lands? In India, some ancient Tamil texts speak of Kumari Kandam, a vast southern continent lost to the sea. Once home, they claim, to a flourishing civilization and the roots of the Tamil people. In the myths of Polynesia, there are tales of ancestral lands swallowed by the ocean. Even in Australian Aboriginal lore, there are stories of rising waters and vanished lands far beyond the coast. Are these shared human memories of post-glacial sea level rise, or echoes of something older? Modern oceanography has mapped the floor of the Indian Ocean in great detail. It is a landscape of underwater ridges, fracture zones, and deep abyssal plains. Certain formations, like the submerged Kerguelen Plateau or the Mascarene Plateau near Mauritius, have been considered possible remnants of ancient landmasses. Some even briefly poked above the water millions of years ago, before sinking again. But none have yielded evidence of human habitation. Not yet. And still, anomalies remain. In 2013, researchers announced the discovery of ancient zircon crystals off the coast of Mauritius. Crystals billions of years old, far older than the island itself. Their presence suggested that parts of an ancient continental crust, long since broken apart, might lie beneath the seafloor. The media called it a lost continent. Mauritia, they named it, perhaps echoing Lemuria. But the truth was more complex. It wasn't a sunken world. It was a fragment, buried and transformed by geological time. A puzzle piece with no clear picture. And yet, the name Lemuria lingers, as if waiting to be filled with meaning again. Could it be that the myth grew from real, fragmentary memories, glacial floods, sinking islands, Migrations lost to oral tradition? Or is Lemuria something else entirely? A projection of our collective longing for origins that feel ancient, pure, and unreachable. The deeper we dig, the more layered the idea becomes. Is Lemuria a scientific theory, long abandoned, a spiritual allegory, a colonial-era attempt to rewrite the origins of civilization? Or does it point, obliquely, to something real, something just beyond the reach of modern instruments and ancient texts? As we drift further into the depths of this mystery, one thing becomes clear. The story of Lemuria may never be about what we can prove, but about what we continue to seek. A homeland not marked on maps, but inscribed in the architecture of myth, memory, and mystery. And so the question remains, quiet as the ocean's breath. Was Lemuria ever real? Or have we simply forgotten where to look? As the sunken myth of Lemuria dissolves beneath the surface of the Indian Ocean, we turn our attention inward, deep into the earth itself. Not toward the past that lies buried beneath layers of sediment, but toward a world said to exist beneath our very feet. Agartha, a name spoken in whispers among mystics, explorers, and occultists for more than a century. Not a city of stone or ruin, but an entire civilization, hidden within the hollow body of the earth. A subterranean realm, lit by an inner sun. A place of impossible peace and impossible science. A kingdom untouched by time. The idea of a world within our world is not new. From ancient Buddhist texts that describe vast networks of underground cities, to Native American stories of ancestors who emerged from within the earth, the concept of a hidden inner realm appears across cultures and centuries. But the name Agartha, and the vivid mythology that now surrounds it, emerged more recently, and with a curious blend of mysticism and pseudoscience. In the late 19th century, French occultist Joseph-Alexandre Saint-Yves d'Alvedre claimed to have received visions of Agartha through telepathic communication with its priests. He described a vast subterranean empire, ruled by wise beings who had retreated underground thousands of years ago to escape the corruption of the surface. This hidden society, he said, was governed by harmony and knowledge, guided by a spiritual code he called synarchy, the opposite of anarchy. Agartha, in his writings, was not a ruin of the past, but a perfected society of the present. Others took up the story. Theosophists blended Agartha with earlier tales of Shambhala, suggesting the two were connected, perhaps different entrances to the same hidden world. In the early 20th century, Polish writer Ferdynand Ossendowski claimed in his book Beasts, Men, and Gods that Mongolian lamas spoke to him of an underground realm called Aghadi, a land of immeasurable power, ruled by a king of the world, waiting for the moment to emerge. And then, in 1947, something changed. That year, famed polar explorer Admiral Richard E. Byrd reportedly led a flight over the North Pole as part of a U.S. Navy operation. According to fringe accounts, based on journals of uncertain origin, Byrd claimed to have flown into an opening at the pole, encountering green valleys, mammoth-like creatures, and advanced flying craft. He was said to have met inhabitants of the inner earth, guardians of Agartha, who warned humanity about the dangers of nuclear war. The US government, according to this version of events, covered it up. There is no credible evidence that any of this occurred. Byrd's official flight records contradict these stories. The so-called secret diary attributed to him is widely considered a hoax. And yet, the story endures. Why? Because the idea of Agartha taps into something primal, an unshakable feeling that we have not explored everything. That beneath our mapped world lies another, untouched, hidden not by distance, but by design. Mainstream science firmly rejects the hollow Earth theory. Seismic data, gathered through decades of research, shows a layered structure: crust, mantle, outer core, and inner core. There is no empty space large enough to house an entire civilization. There are no entrances at the poles, and no anomalies in gravitational or magnetic fields that suggest anything unusual. Every measure we have taken points to a solid, active planet. And yet, there are still unexplained gaps. Cave systems stretch for miles beneath the Earth, many of them still uncharted. Vast caverns in China, Vietnam, and Central America remain largely unexplored. Ancient underground cities, like those found in Cappadocia, Turkey, reveal that entire populations once lived out of sight for months at a time, perhaps even longer. The question is not whether underground civilizations are possible. They've existed. The question is whether one still does, hidden not only from modern sight, but from historical memory. The legend of Agartha insists it does. Some versions speak of advanced technologies powered by vibration and light. Others describe entrances hidden in the Himalayas, the Gobi Desert, or the Amazon. In these stories, the people of Agartha are not aliens, but us, as we once were, or could become. A remnant of an ancient, pre-cataclysmic world that chose seclusion over survival. A civilization not lost, but waiting. Skeptics rightly note the lack of physical evidence, no entrances, no artifacts, no verifiable contact. They argue that Agartha is a modern myth, born not from ruins or relics, but from longing. A mirror we hold up to our own fractured world, imagining that somewhere, peace still reigns. But what if the myth is more than a mirror? What if it is a memory? The Earth is old, billions of years old. Human history is short. How much could have happened and been forgotten before the first symbols were carved in stone? How many layers of time lie between us and the first fires of civilization? As the legends deepen, the science holds firm, and yet the story remains, like a quiet heartbeat beneath the crust. So we are left once more with a question, suspended in the space between imagination and reality. Is Agartha only a dream beneath the surface? Or could something, someone, still be down there, waiting to be discovered? As the legends of Agartha retreat into the depths of the Earth, we rise again to the surface, this time into the thin, high-altitude air of central Mexico, where a city once stood so vast, so precisely aligned, so eerily silent, that even the Aztecs, arriving centuries after its fall, believed it was not made by humans. They called it Teotihuacan, the place where gods were born. Today, its ruins still loom with an eerie, geometric precision. The Avenue of the Dead stretches straight and silent for miles, flanked by monumental platforms and vast plazas. At its heart stands the Pyramid of the Sun, one of the largest ancient structures on Earth, alongside the equally commanding Pyramid of the Moon. Beneath these stone giants lie subterranean tunnels and chambers, filled with artifacts, traces of rituals, and strange anomalies. And yet, despite its grandeur, despite its mathematical brilliance, we do not know who built it. We do not know their name. We do not know their language. We do not even know what they called the city. By the time the Aztecs arrived in the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century, Teotihuacan had already been abandoned for centuries. Its builders were long gone. Their monuments remained, but their memory had vanished. The Aztecs treated the site with awe, believing it to be the work of divine beings or a forgotten race of giants. They never claimed it as their own. Archaeologists date the city's peak to between 100 and 600 AD, though its earliest foundations may be much older. At its height, it was one of the largest cities in the world, home to perhaps 100,000 people. But no one knows what happened to them. There are no royal tombs, no named rulers, no inscriptions telling of conquests or kings, just art, architecture, and silence. How does a civilization capable of building one of the most sophisticated cities of the ancient world leave behind so little of its identity? Some scholars suggest that Teotihuacan was a multi-ethnic metropolis, a kind of ancient melting pot, ruled by a priestly class that intentionally avoided glorifying individuals. Others argue that writing systems may have existed, but were lost or never fully developed. Some posit that Teotihuacan was more a theocratic center than a political empire, its power based on ritual and ideology rather than warfare or dynastic rule. And yet, for every explanation, more questions arise. Why were the city's main monuments aligned so precisely with astronomical phenomena? Why does the Pyramid of the Sun sit atop a cave, possibly a natural lava tube, believed by some to represent a portal to the underworld? Why was the interior of the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent found lined with mercury and filled with tiny metallic spheres, shimmering like stars? Some interpretations point to the symbolic representations of cosmology, of mythic cycles, of life and death. But others wonder, was this symbolism, or was it something else? More speculative theories suggest the builders of Teotihuacan may not have been a single culture at all, but a legacy. That the city may have been constructed atop earlier settlements, perhaps over centuries, by groups whose names have been lost to time. Some propose that knowledge passed down through generations may have originated from a now vanished civilization, one whose very existence is in doubt. A few even go further, linking Teotihuacan to far-reaching diffusionist ideas. They point to similarities between Mesoamerican pyramids and those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. They speak of mysterious trade connections, of shared iconography, of impossible precision. Could there have been contact between distant worlds, long before Columbus? Could Teotihuacan represent a branch of a civilization we no longer remember? Most mainstream archaeologists reject these theories, citing lack of evidence and the danger of undermining indigenous innovation. And rightly so, the people of ancient Mesoamerica were builders, artists, and thinkers in their own right. But the enigma of Teotihuacan remains, because even within accepted history, its story is incomplete. Consider this. How does a city of this scale, planned with such precision, governed for centuries, leave behind no names, no records, no continuity? Was it destroyed in a cataclysm? Was it abandoned slowly, eroded by internal collapse or environmental stress? Or was it never a civilization in the conventional sense at all, but something different? A ceremonial city, built for a purpose we no longer understand. In the end, we return to the silence, the massive stones, the perfect alignments, the ghosts of a city that should tell us more, but doesn't. And so, the mystery of Teotihuacan persists, not just because we don't know what happened, but because we don't know who made it happen. And if we don't know who built Teotihuacan, is it possible they never existed in the way we think? That the civilization behind it, its rulers, its architects, its visionaries, was never written into the historical record at all? Perhaps we're not looking in the wrong place, just asking the wrong questions. What if the builders of Teotihuacan were not forgotten by accident, but by design? As we leave behind the silent avenues of Teotihuacan, we journey east into the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, in the cradle of civilization, lies a landscape scattered with the broken bones of the world's first cities, Ur, Uruk, Eridu. Beneath layers of sand and history, cuneiform tablets whisper the names of kings and gods. And among them, one name rises with particular force: Anunnaki. Carved into stone tablets more than 4,000 years old, the Anunnaki appear as divine beings, gods of the sky, earth, and underworld, each with their role in shaping humanity's destiny. According to ancient Sumerian myth, They descended from the heavens to establish order on earth. They created mankind, governed the skies, and passed judgment in the realm of the dead. But were they gods, or something else entirely? In recent decades, the name Anunnaki has drifted far from its mythological roots. For some, it no longer refers to a pantheon of deities, but to a powerful, advanced race, perhaps not from this world at all. According to this controversial theory, the Anunnaki were not myth, but memory. A civilization so technologically advanced that their works appeared godlike to the ancient Sumerians. It's a theory that straddles the line between history and hypothesis, supported more by interpretation than evidence. But the questions it raises are difficult to dismiss. Why do ancient Sumerian texts describe beings who descended from the sky to rule and instruct? Why do some depictions show them with wings, or tools, or strange box-like objects strapped to their backs? Why, in some accounts, do they seem to possess knowledge far beyond what should have been known in the 3rd millennium BC? One of the most well-known interpretations comes from the work of Zecharia Sitchin, who proposed that the Anunnaki were visitors from a hypothetical planet called Nibiru, a celestial body with an elongated orbit that passes near Earth every 3,600 years. According to Sitchin, the Anunnaki came to Earth to mine gold, needed to save their atmosphere, and genetically engineered humans as a labor force. It's a theory widely criticized by scholars, dismissed as pseudoscience, based on misreadings of Sumerian language and myth. And yet, the story has captivated millions. Why? Because something about the ancient world doesn't quite add up. The sudden emergence of writing, astronomy, and urban planning in Sumer. The detailed knowledge of the stars carved into tablets. The mathematical precision of ziggurats, aligned with celestial bodies. These achievements appeared rapidly, with no known precursor. Could it all have come from human ingenuity alone? Or was there an older knowledge being remembered, an inheritance from something long before? Mainstream archaeology holds a firm stance. The Anunnaki were mythological figures, no different than the Greek pantheon or the gods of Egypt. Their stories reflect the structure of society, hierarchies, rituals, fears, and hopes. The winged beings were symbolic, the stories were metaphors, the flood myths, the creation tales, the divine councils, all echoes of human psychology, not historical record. But there are anomalies that invite further scrutiny. Inscriptions describe Enki, one of the leading Anunnaki, as descending into the Abzu, translated by some as a watery abyss, by others as a subterranean base. The god Ninurta is said to wield a terrible weapon that can level mountains. And in the Epic of Gilgamesh, we find references to forbidden knowledge, gates to the heavens, and divine technology. These are, of course, literary elements. But where did such imagery come from? Are these merely poetic inventions, or distorted memories of a civilization that once walked the line between the mortal and the divine? Across Mesopotamia, temples called ziggurats rise like artificial mountains, reaching for the sky. Their stair-stepped forms have no direct parallel in nature, but in the stories, they were meeting places between gods and men. The most famous of them, the ziggurat of Ur, may have inspired the biblical Tower of Babel. But even here, we find layers of mystery. Could these structures have served a purpose beyond the ritual? Were they designed for communication or imitation? Fringe theorists point to similarities between the Anunnaki stories and myths from other parts of the world. The gods of Mesoamerica who came from the stars, the divine instructors of Egypt, the mysterious watchers of the Hebrew Apocrypha. Are these shared symbols born from similar psychological needs, or fragments of a common forgotten source? The archaeological record remains silent. No machines, No artifacts of alien origin. No undeniable evidence of visitors from beyond. But in the texts, in the symbols, in the stories repeated across cultures, something stirs. Perhaps the Anunnaki never existed, at least not in the way some imagine. Perhaps they are the reflections of humanity's earliest struggles to understand its place in the cosmos. Or perhaps they are something more. A code written into the bedrock of civilization, a shadow behind the rise of cities, kings, and gods. So we are left, again, with a question. Were the Anunnaki simply gods of myth, born in the imagination of the earliest scribes, or the final trace of a civilization too ancient, too strange, to fully recognize? From the ancient plains of Mesopotamia and the shadowy presence of the Anunnaki, we move across the vastness of the Pacific, to a remote corner of the world where ruins rise not from desert sands or jungle overgrowth, but from the sea itself. Here, off the eastern shore of Pohnpei in Micronesia, lies Nan Madol, a haunting stone city built atop a coral reef. Nearly 100 artificial islets, connected by narrow canals and encircled by crashing surf, form the remains of what appears to be a sacred and political complex, unlike any other on Earth. Massive basalt columns, stacked like logs, form walls that rise from the water, defying explanation with their scale and placement. There are no cranes, no beasts of burden, no written records, just stone, silence, and questions. The site, often called the Venice of the Pacific, spans over 200 acres. Its most prominent structure, Nan Dawas, looms with defensive walls over 7 meters high and basalt columns weighing up to 50 tons. The stone used to construct the city is not native to the reef. It was transported, somehow, from quarries miles away, over water, without mortar, and with a level of organization and effort that boggles the imagination. But who built Nan Madol? And why? Archaeologists date the site to between 800 and 1200 AD, with the Saudeleur dynasty believed to be its last known rulers. Oral histories speak of two brothers, Olasopa and Olasipa, who arrived from the sea and used magical powers to levitate the stones into place. Together, they established the centralized rule of the Saudeleur, who governed Pohnpei for generations until their downfall. These stories, told in hushed tones by local elders, are not presented as metaphor. They are spoken as fact, ancestral memory woven into legend. Mainstream historians interpret the construction of Nan Madol as a feat of communal labor, using rafts, ramps, and ingenious coordination. They point to the abundance of nearby basalt sources and suggest that the coral foundations were prepared with slow, deliberate effort over centuries. Still, this explanation has gaps. The sheer number of basalt columns, estimated to be over 750,000 pieces, and the scale of movement required across open water raise uncomfortable questions about what technologies or techniques might have been employed. No tools have been found, no shipwrecks, no blueprints. And the deeper one looks, the stranger it becomes. The islets are aligned in ways that suggest astronomical significance. Some structures seem to follow celestial patterns. Others appear to reference cardinal directions with an accuracy difficult to explain, given the tools available at the time. In 2019, sonar imaging of the seabed around Pohnpei suggested the existence of sunken structures offshore, buried beneath silt and coral. Could these be earlier phases of the site, now lost to the rising sea? Or the remnants of an even older civilization? Some fringe theories propose that Nan Madol is a surviving fragment of a much older, global maritime culture, perhaps connected to the lost continent of Lemuria, or Mu, whose supposed descendants traveled across the Pacific, leaving behind isolated pockets of advanced architecture. Others link it to the Polynesian voyaging tradition, suggesting that seafaring knowledge far more sophisticated than once believed may have allowed for the movement of vast stone across vast distances. And yet, there is no consensus, no clear cultural trail. Nan Madol seems to emerge from nowhere and vanish just as mysteriously. The Saudalir themselves, though remembered in local legend, left no written language, no carvings, no dates. Their reign ended in conflict, with oral tradition claiming their cruelty led to their overthrow by Isokalekal, a semi-divine warrior who arrived, like their ancestors, from across the sea. The dynasty dissolved, the site fell into decay, and the jungle, wind, and ocean slowly took it back. Today, Nan Madol is largely uninhabited. Locals often avoid it, saying it is cursed or protected by spirits. Some believe it is dangerous to visit after dark. Others say the stones themselves are alive, watching, waiting. Whether these stories are myth or memory, they reinforce the sense that Nan Madol is not just a ruin. It is a question carved into stone. Was it the capital of an early island empire? A sacred site for rituals we no longer understand? A prototype for something larger, perhaps now lost beneath the rising seas? Or could it be that the civilization that built Nan Madol never truly existed in the way we expect? That it was something altogether different, born not of human ambition, but of forgotten knowledge? The sea holds its secrets well. The coral grows, the basalt endures, and the voices of the past, drowned beneath tides and time, remain just out of reach. So we are left with the mystery. Did the builders of Nan Madol leave behind a glimpse of something far older than we imagine? Or a story we've yet to fully begin to understand? As the stone canals and coral foundations of Nan Madol disappear beneath the Pacific tide, we drift farther into open ocean, beyond charted islands and continental shelves, toward a legend born not from excavation, but from a whisper that has echoed across time. Mu. A name barely remembered, yet strangely familiar. A civilization said to have flourished in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, long before the rise of Sumer or Egypt. A vast continent, teeming with life, culture, and knowledge. Now lost beneath the waves, vanished without a trace. The idea of Mu emerged in the 19th century, first suggested by Augustus Le Plongeon, an explorer and writer who claimed to have deciphered hidden messages within Mayan texts. According to his interpretation, these writings told the story of an ancient land called Mu, once the home of a great civilization that spread its influence across the world before being swallowed by cataclysm. He believed that Mu had been the original cradle of mankind, a forgotten progenitor of ancient wisdom. Mainstream scholars quickly dismissed Le Plongeon's claims, citing his lack of linguistic training and the dubious nature of his translations. And yet, the concept didn't die. It grew. In the early 20th century, the British-born occultist James Churchward reignited interest in Mu, claiming to have discovered ancient tablets in India that spoke of a motherland in the Pacific, home to tens of millions of people, ruled by a benevolent priestly elite. He described Mu as a continent stretching from Hawaii to Easter Island to Fiji, covered with temples, gardens, and towers of gleaming stone. According to Churchward, Mu was destroyed in a single night of fire and earthquakes, sinking into the sea and erasing nearly all evidence of its existence. But the world he described didn't exist on any map. There are no known ruins in the middle of the Pacific that match Churchward's descriptions. No artifacts, no inscriptions, no geological record of a sunken continent on the scale he imagined. Modern oceanography has scanned the Pacific floor with precision. While it reveals ancient seamounts, volcanic plateaus, and drowned archipelagos, nothing confirms the existence of a lost landmass of that size. And yet, questions remain. How do we explain the sudden emergence of sophisticated stonework and astronomical alignments in island cultures spread across thousands of kilometers of ocean. How did the Polynesians, navigating with no maps or metal instruments, traverse a third of the globe with uncanny precision, reaching and settling islands as remote as Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and New Zealand? Was this knowledge purely homegrown or inherited? Some theorists have pointed to scattered megalithic structures found on remote islands as potential evidence of an earlier maritime culture, perhaps remnants of Mu, the Moai of Easter Island, the Trilithon at Tongatapu, the stone enclosures of Pohnpei. Are these isolated achievements of local ingenuity, or faint echoes of a deeper, older tradition? Skeptics argue that Mu is a textbook case of pseudo-history, born from colonial fantasies and 19th-century mysticism. They point out that the idea of a lost Pacific civilization conveniently bypasses the agency and creativity of the very cultures it claims to explain. And they're not wrong to be cautious. The idea of Mu, like Atlantis or Lemuria, has often been co-opted to support dubious ideologies and unfounded claims. But even within the realm of science, the Pacific holds many mysteries. Recent studies have revealed signs of ancient land bridges and submerged islands that may have once connected parts of the Pacific in ways we no longer see. Genetic evidence shows surprising links between distant island populations, suggesting a complex web of migration and contact. And deep beneath the sea, in places like the Ontong Java Plateau and the Marshall Islands, lie massive underwater formations, most of them natural, but some less easily explained. Some researchers, treading carefully between hypothesis and speculation, have proposed the existence of now submerged archipelagos that may have supported early human cultures, small, scattered remnants of land, long eroded by time and tide. Could these have been the true seedbeds of legend? Not a single lost continent, but a constellation of forgotten islands, erased by rising seas. Perhaps Mu never existed in the grand mythical sense. Perhaps it was not a continent, but a name. An idea passed down through stories, misread texts, and dreams of origin. A metaphor for a time before borders and nations, when knowledge flowed with the tide. Or perhaps the truth lies deeper, still hidden beneath sediment and silence, waiting for the right question to be asked or the right piece of evidence to surface. So we end, once again, with uncertainty. If Mu never existed, why does its story persist, across books, myths, and memory? And if something once did exist, scattered across the vast Pacific before the world was mapped, how would we even begin to recognize it? Could it be that in chasing the myth of Mu, we are really chasing the outlines of something far more ancient than we know, something too large to fully lose and too old to ever truly remember? As the legend of Mu dissolves into the currents of the Pacific, we return once more to the land. This time, to the blistering sands of the Giza Plateau. Here, beneath the unrelenting Egyptian sun, stands one of the most iconic monuments in human history. The Great Sphinx. Carved from a single massive outcrop of limestone, the Sphinx crouches in silence, part lion, part man, facing eternally east toward the rising sun. At 240 feet long and over 60 feet high, it remains the largest monolithic statue in the world. And yet, for all its majesty, we do not know with certainty who built it, when, or even why. Mainstream Egyptology places its construction during the reign of Pharaoh Khafre, around 2500 BC, based largely on its proximity to his pyramid and the style of nearby temples. But the Sphinx offers no inscriptions of its own, no cartouches, no clear identifying marks, just stone, weathered, eroded, watching. And it's here that the questions begin. Why does the body of the Sphinx appear so disproportionately small compared to its head? Why are the levels of erosion on the enclosure walls so severe? More than what might be expected in just 4,500 years. Why are there signs of water damage in a region that has been desert for millennia? In the 1990s, geologist Dr. Robert Schoch proposed a controversial idea that the deep vertical weathering on the Sphinx's enclosure was caused not by wind and sand, but by prolonged rainfall. If true, this would place the statue's origin not in 2500 BC, but potentially thousands of years earlier, during a period when Egypt experienced heavy seasonal rains, perhaps as far back as 7000 BC, or even earlier. Such a date would upend everything we think we know about the origins of Egyptian civilization. It would place the Sphinx in a time long before the first known dynasties, before writing, before the wheel, before history. So, if the Sphinx predates the pharaohs, who built it? Some suggest that an unknown pre-dynastic culture, now lost to time, may have erected the monument. People whose memory has vanished, leaving behind only stone and mystery. Others propose a symbolic explanation, that the Sphinx was inherited, recarved, or restored by later Egyptians, who no longer understood its true origins. The evidence is circumstantial, but persistent. There are rumors of a lion-shaped monument, referenced in ancient texts, said to mark a point of celestial alignment during the so-called Age of Leo, between 10,500 and 8,000 BC, when the constellation Leo would have risen directly in front of the Sphinx at dawn on the spring equinox. Was the statue designed to mark this epoch? Was it, in some way, a monument not to gods or kings, but to time itself? And then there are the fringe theories, compelling to some, dismissed by others, that the Sphinx was not carved by Egyptians at all, but inherited from a forgotten civilization wiped out by a global cataclysm. That it was once part of a complex far older than the pyramids, perhaps constructed by survivors of Atlantis, Lemuria, or another lost society. That its head was originally that of a lion, later recarved into a human visage, perhaps during Khafra's reign, to bring it in line with more contemporary iconography. Supporting this idea is the visual mismatch between the head and the body. The head seems too small, out of proportion, as if it were carved down from an earlier form. Could the Sphinx we know be a revision of something far older? Of course, mainstream archaeologists caution against such speculation. They argue that erosion can be deceptive, that the Sphinx's head and body reflect stylistic choices, not hidden history. They point to the lack of definitive evidence, the absence of tools, of layers, of intermediate forms. And yet, the absence itself invites curiosity. Why is this monument so silent? Why has no tomb been found beneath it, despite legends of hidden chambers? Why do ancient texts, those that mention the Sphinx at all, speak of it as already ancient, already mysterious, even to the earliest Egyptians? In 1817, tunnels were discovered beneath the Sphinx. Some led nowhere, others were sealed. Later explorations found cavities and anomalies beneath its paws. One legend, inscribed on the so-called dream stele between its front legs, tells of a young prince who fell asleep in its shadow and was promised kingship by the Sphinx's spirit, if only he would clear away the sands that buried it. Was this a metaphor or a memory? Over the years, technological scans have revealed voids beneath the structure, chambers whose purpose remains unknown. Are they natural formations, empty tombs, storage for sacred relics? Or could they conceal something even more extraordinary? Evidence of a civilization that once stood at the dawn of time, long before the story of Egypt began. The truth remains buried, both in stone and in time. Perhaps the Sphinx was built by the hands of men we've long forgotten. Or perhaps it stands as a monument, not just to ancient engineering, but to human amnesia. A silent guardian of a past we can barely imagine. So we are left once more with a riddle, carved in stone, worn by wind, and half swallowed by sand. Is the Sphinx merely what we believe it to be, a monument of a known kingdom? Or could it be the last surviving sentinel of a civilization that left no name, no record, and no trace beyond the gaze of a lion turned to man? As the stoic gaze of the Sphinx fades behind us, we set sail across the ancient Mediterranean, a sea once crowded with empires, merchants, and myths. The waters are calm now, but in the twilight of the Bronze Age, they churned with fire and chaos. Entire civilizations collapsed in rapid succession. Palaces burned, cities fell silent, trade routes vanished. And in the center of this storm, mentioned in fragmented records and carved on fading stone, were the enigmatic figures known only as the Sea Peoples. No one knows who they were. No empire claimed them. No nation left their name. They appeared suddenly, around the 12th century BC, like a tide of destruction, sweeping across Anatolia, the Levant, and Egypt, in a wave of violence that ended the great powers of the age. The Hittite Empire, gone. Mycenaean Greece, reduced to ruins. The mighty cities of the Levant, abandoned. Even Egypt, though it survived, was left weakened and shaken. All we have are fragments, stone reliefs, battle inscriptions, scattered clues etched into the records of those who faced them. The most famous depiction comes from the mortuary temple of Pharaoh Ramses III at Medinet Habu. There, in detailed bas-relief, we see strange warriors with feathered helmets, ox-drawn carts, and ships unlike any seen before. The accompanying text describes an alliance of foreign invaders, unknown in origin, united in purpose. Egypt called them peoples of the sea, a phrase that would outlive every other name they carried. But who were they? Theories abound. Some scholars believe they were refugees from collapsing civilizations, displaced peoples from Greece, Anatolia, or the Balkans, fleeing drought, famine, or war. Others see them as opportunistic raiders, exploiting a moment of weakness across a vulnerable region. There are those who link them to the Philistines, or to groups like the Shodan, Shekelesh, and Luka, names recorded but never fully understood. And yet, despite decades of research, there remains no consensus, no central homeland, no shared language, no cultural remains that clearly define them. It's almost as if they appeared out of nowhere and disappeared just as swiftly. Could it be that the Sea Peoples were never a single people at all, but a convergence of desperate migrants, mercenaries, and raiders, banded together by circumstance? A symptom, rather than a cause, of the Great Collapse? Or is there something else behind the silence? Something more intentional? Some have speculated that the Sea Peoples may represent a forgotten civilization, one not recorded because it lay beyond the margins of the known world. A maritime culture with no need for cities, no need for monuments, only ships, weapons, and movement. Could such a people exist without leaving clear archaeological footprints? A civilization of the sea, erased by the very element they mastered. There are tantalizing clues. In Sardinia, Malta, and Crete, megalithic structures hint at seafaring knowledge and complex societies that predate the classical world. In southern Italy and the Aegean, sudden shifts in pottery styles and burial practices suggest foreign influence or abrupt change. Even in Egypt, records speak of northerners arriving in waves, often with no explanation. But none of this is definitive. The Sea Peoples remain shadows on the edge of history, present only through the chaos they left behind. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part, because their impact was immense. In just a few decades, the interconnected world of the Bronze Age, defined by trade, diplomacy, and monumental architecture, crumbled. Writing systems disappeared. Urban centers were abandoned, Knowledge was lost. It would take centuries for civilization to recover. And yet, the people said to have caused it all left no trace of themselves. Could it be that we're looking in the wrong places? That the sea peoples were not merely invaders, but the last remnants of a civilization already in decline, one that collapsed inward before spilling outward in search of survival? Or, as some fringe theorists suggest, were they not from this region at all, but outsiders from a distant, now lost culture, arriving not in desperation, but with purpose? Theories like these often blur the line between archaeology and imagination. And yet, they persist, not because they are proven, but because the alternative is equally mysterious. How can a force powerful enough to topple empires leave behind so little? How can an event so transformative be so poorly understood? We are left with fragments, shattered tablets, fading carvings, conflicting theories, and with one name, the Sea Peoples, a term that may describe invaders, refugees, or something else entirely. A name that stands not for who they were, but for what we don't know. So we ask again, as we have throughout this exploration, were the Sea Peoples real? Were they many, or one? Were they the end of an age, or the beginning of a story we've yet to understand? And if they were more than a name, if they were a civilization lost beneath waves, wars, and time, then what else remains buried just beneath the surface of our history? As the wake of the Sea Peoples fades into the Mediterranean's restless waves, we follow the horizon westward, toward a story older than history itself, a name spoken across centuries like a spell. Atlantis. It begins with Plato. In two dialogues written in the 4th century BC, Timaeus and Critias, the Greek philosopher describes an advanced civilization beyond the Pillars of Heracles, today known as the Strait of Gibraltar. A mighty island empire, blessed with fertile land, shimmering temples, and knowledge beyond its time. Atlantis, he claimed, was powerful, ambitious, and in the end, arrogant. In a single day and night of misfortune, it was swallowed by the sea, never to be seen again. At first glance, Plato's story reads like allegory, a moral tale about hubris and the ideal state. And yet, his account is curiously specific. Names, distances, dates. He claims the story came not from imagination, but from ancient Egyptian records passed down through Solon, an Athenian statesman. Could he have drawn on something real, something distorted by time and translation? For over 2 millennia, the question has lingered. Where was Atlantis? Was it a myth, a memory, a misreading? Mainstream historians consider it a philosophical invention, a fable used to contrast ideal societies with corrupt ones. No credible evidence has ever been found to confirm the existence of an Atlantean empire, and no ancient sources prior to Plato mention it. Still, the idea endures, and not just in folklore, but in serious inquiry. Some scholars have looked to the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete, an advanced Bronze Age culture that flourished until around 1450 BC, when a series of disasters, including a massive volcanic eruption on nearby Thera, modern-day Santorini, brought it to its knees. The timing, geography, and sudden collapse have led some to suggest that the Atlantis story may be a distant echo of this real-world event, preserved through centuries of oral tradition before reaching Plato's pen. Others look farther afield: the Azores, the Caribbean, Antarctica, West Africa, South America. Dozens of theories, some grounded, others speculative, place Atlantis in every corner of the globe. From underwater ruins off the coast of Bimini to circular formations in the Sahara Desert's Rishat structure, seekers continue to interpret natural formations as possible remnants of this elusive land. And yet, the sea remains silent. There are no inscriptions, no artifacts, no language, tools, or texts, clearly belonging to Atlantis. Nothing that meets the standards of archaeology. And still, the story refuses to disappear. Why? Perhaps because Atlantis taps into something deeper than historical curiosity. A longing for a forgotten golden age. A belief that we are not the first to rise, nor the last to fall. It suggests a cycle of knowledge gained, of catastrophe endured, of memory erased. Atlantis is not merely a lost place, it is a lost possibility. Consider the level of detail in Plato's writing. He speaks of concentric rings of land and water, of canals and bridges, of massive temples clad in precious metals. He describes a population governed by law and virtue, until greed led to their ruin. Are these inventions of a philosopher, or reflections of something older, passed down like a dream from a time we no longer remember? Fringe theories stretch the bounds of evidence, but raise provocative questions. Could there have been an advanced maritime civilization in the deep past, now erased by shifting seas and rising waters? Global sea levels were dramatically lower during the last ice age. Vast regions of what is now ocean were once habitable land. Could settlements have existed there, submerged when the ice melted and the oceans rose? Could Atlantis be not one location, but a memory that outlived its source? Even ancient cultures in far-flung regions speak of great floods and drowned lands. Myths echoed in Mesopotamia, India, and the Americas. Stories of deluge, of punishment, of civilizations wiped clean by water. Are these coincidences of the human imagination, or fragments of a shared ancestral memory? The absence of hard proof has not deterred the search. If anything, it has amplified it, drawing explorers, scientists, and dreamers deeper into the mystery. For every closed door, another possibility opens. For every map without Atlantis, there is a wave beneath which something might still remain. So we are left with the echo of a story, told by a philosopher, repeated by 1,000 voices since. Atlantis, neither proven nor disproven. Neither found nor forgotten. Was it a tale told to instruct? A distorted account of a real disaster? A metaphor for the fallibility of civilizations? Or was it something more? A real culture, now lost, its only surviving monument etched not in stone, but in story. And if Atlantis did exist, if even part of its tale is rooted in truth, what else has the sea taken? What other civilizations, names, and histories lie buried beneath the ocean floor, waiting for us to remember? As the legend of Atlantis sinks once more into the depths of human memory, we shift from the sea to the highlands of Lebanon, where, nestled in the Bekaa Valley, a colossal enigma rises from the earth, carved in stone and silence. Baalbek. The ruins here are immense. Towering columns, some standing over 60 feet high, reach toward the sky like petrified giants. Beneath them, foundations of stone blocks, each weighing hundreds of tons, form the base of what was once the Temple of Jupiter, one of the largest temples of the Roman world. But it is not the Roman craftsmanship that draws the deepest mystery. It is what lies beneath. 3 massive stones, known collectively as the Trilithon, rest at the foundation of the complex. Each is estimated to weigh over 800 tons. Nearby lies the stone of the pregnant woman, a megalith still attached to its quarry bed, weighing as much as 1,000 tons. These are not just heavy stones, they are among the largest ever used in construction. And they were placed, somehow, millennia ago, with such precision that even today, we struggle to explain how it was done. Roman engineering, it is said, is responsible for much of Baalbek's visible splendor. The columns, the temples, the classical layout, these reflect Rome's architectural ambition. But the foundation stones predate it. Here lies the riddle. The Romans were known for their skill. But nowhere else in the empire did they move stones of this size. There is no record of the technology needed to transport, lift, and place them. No writings, no plans, and no clear explanation for why such massive stones would be used in a place where smaller ones would suffice. Who placed them? Some theories suggest that these megaliths were part of an earlier structure, perhaps a Phoenician or pre-Phoenician temple. Baalbek, after all, was sacred long before the Romans arrived. The name itself is thought to mean Lord of the Bekaa, or City of Baal, referring to ancient Semitic deities. Later, during the Hellenistic period, it was associated with the Greek god Helios. But the stones remain stubbornly out of place, resisting categorization. Could an earlier, now vanished civilization have constructed this colossal platform? One with knowledge or tools that have since been lost. No inscriptions tell us. No tools have been found. Just the stones, massive, unmoving, and perfectly fitted. Some geologists argue that the stones could, in theory, have been moved using sledges, wooden rollers, and sheer manpower. Others propose elaborate ramp systems or earthworks, but all agree it would have required not just strength, but coordination, planning, and purpose on an enormous scale. For a civilization we know so little about, that scale feels disproportionate. Why build this way? Why choose stones so massive, so difficult to handle, when smaller blocks could have served the same function? Was there a symbolic reason? A ritual one? Or was the foundation meant to last forever, anchoring a temple that transcended the ambitions of any single culture? More speculative theories abound. Some propose that Baalbek's original builders were not local at all, but belonged to a forgotten global civilization, one that spread across continents during a lost era of high technology. Others go further, linking the site to tales of the Nephilim, ancient giants mentioned in biblical and apocryphal texts, said to have walked the earth in a time before the flood. Still others point to ancient astronaut theories, that the site was once a landing platform for sky gods, or visitors from beyond. Its massive stones a foundation built not for men, but for something else entirely. Such ideas remain outside the scope of accepted archaeology, but they persist, fueled by the sheer mystery of the place. Because Baalbek does not offer a neat narrative, its stones defy simplicity, and their silence feels deliberate. Even the Romans, so proud of their engineering feats elsewhere, seemed content to build upon what already stood, never claiming the megalithic foundation as their own. Was it respect or uncertainty? Today, the site lies quiet beneath the Lebanese sun. Tourists walk its ancient paths. Archaeologists measure, debate, and compare. But the mystery endures. The stones of Baalbek remain where they were placed thousands of years ago, untouched by time, unmoved by conquest. We can stand before them, measure their weight, calculate their volume, but we cannot fully explain them. So we are left to wonder, were these colossal stones the product of a civilization we no longer remember? Were they laid by hands now lost to time, their purpose forgotten, their identity erased? Or are they the foundation of a story just beginning to be understood? One carved not only into stone, but into the unanswered questions of history itself. And if Baalbek's true builders never left a name, what else might they have left behind? From the highlands of Lebanon and the enduring stones of Baalbek, we now descend into the depths of the sea. Far from the sun-baked ruins of the Mediterranean, beneath the clear blue waters of the East China Sea, lies another puzzle in stone. Off the southern coast of Japan, near the remote island of Yonaguni, something vast and angular slumbers beneath the waves. It is known as the Yonaguni Monument, an underwater formation that has stirred wonder, debate, and deep mystery since its discovery in the 1980s. At first glance, it appears artificial. Sharp geometric edges cut into layered rock. Long stairways descend in perfect symmetry. Wide, flat platforms give way to towering walls and corridors. Some divers describe it as a submerged ziggurat, or the skeleton of an ancient stepped pyramid, a place of order and precision, lost to the sea. But the question remains, is it natural or something more? Geologists have pointed out that Yonaguni is composed of sandstone, a material known to fracture along plains, creating rectangular shapes and terraces that, under the right conditions, can appear man-made. Earthquakes and erosion could explain the clean breaks and sharp lines, and the sea itself, over thousands of years, sculpts even the hardest stone. Yet, not all are convinced. Marine geologist Dr. Masaki Kimura, who spent decades studying the site, argues that at least parts of the formation show signs of artificial modification. He points to what he believes are carved staircases, straight corridors, and even engravings or symbols. In some areas, he claims, stone pillars appear to have been placed intentionally, suggesting the hand of a builder, not just the push of the sea. Skeptics maintain that such claims are speculative. No tools, no artifacts, no bones or pottery have been found. No culture is known to have inhabited the Yonaguni area at the scale such construction would suggest, at least none within the last 10,000 years. And yet, the site sits 25 meters underwater, which raises a more complicated question. If Yonaguni was shaped by human hands, then when? During the last ice age, sea levels were much lower. Around 12,000 years ago, vast stretches of land now submerged were dry and habitable. Coastal plains connected what are now islands. Shorelines extended for miles. If the Yonaguni monument predates this flood, it would place its construction before the dawn of known civilization. Before Sumer, before Egypt, before writing itself. That timeline alone unsettles everything we think we know. Could there have been a seafaring culture in East Asia before the end of the Ice Age, capable not only of navigation, but of monumental architecture? A civilization erased not by war or decay, but by rising seas. Some point to Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey, an archaeological site over 11,000 years old, as proof that complex societies existed long before previously believed. Could Yonaguni be a similar outlier? A missing piece of a forgotten past? Others remain cautious. Without definitive artifacts, it is difficult to move from possibility to proof. Natural formations, however remarkable, can easily be mistaken for the work of human hands, especially when viewed through the lens of desire, of hope, of myth. And there is myth. In Japanese folklore, ancient records speak of submerged cities and vanished islands. Most notably, the legendary land of Mu, often linked to Pacific flood myths and lost civilizations. Some stories describe the sinking of entire kingdoms due to divine punishment, their temples swallowed by the sea. Are these just cautionary tales, or cultural memories of real cataclysms? From Okinawa to Taiwan, megalithic stone structures dot the region, many of them unexplained, some with astronomical alignments. Could Yonaguni be part of a broader, regional tradition, now mostly lost beneath the ocean's surface? And if so, who were these builders? There is no name, no culture, no language, just stone, shaped by mystery and time. Divers who visit the monument often describe an eerie stillness. The geometry feels deliberate, the silence profound. Whether natural or not, it evokes something beyond explanation, something that invites contemplation, not just analysis. Perhaps that is the heart of the mystery. Not whether Yonaguni was carved or cracked, but what it represents. A world beneath the waves, a story written in stone, erased by time, awaiting rediscovery. Could it be that the builders of Yonaguni, if they existed, belonged to a civilization we have never known? one that rose and fell before memory, leaving behind only shapes, shadows, and silence? Or are we seeing only what we wish to see, patterns born of nature, mistaken for intention? The ocean does not answer. It holds its secrets, moving gently across ancient steps that may be stairs or may be illusions. And so we are left, once more, with the unknown. Did someone build Yonaguni long before history began? Or is this monument the greatest trick of nature, reminding us just how much of our past still lies beneath the surface, waiting to be seen? As we surface from the quiet depths of Yonaguni, leaving behind questions carved in stone beneath the sea, we turn our attention to another enigma, one not hidden beneath the ocean floor, but found within a shipwreck, rusted by salt and nearly forgotten by time: the Antikythera mechanism. Discovered in 1901 by sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera, this corroded bronze artifact was at first just a curiosity, one of many relics recovered from an ancient Roman shipwreck. It lay silent in a crate for years before anyone realized what it truly was. Today, it is considered the world's oldest known analog computer. Housed within a shattered casing, no larger than a shoebox, the mechanism was made of dozens of intricate bronze gears, precisely interlocked and calibrated. Its function? To model the heavens. With dials that predicted solar and lunar eclipses, tracked the phases of the moon, and followed the complex cycles of planetary movement with astonishing accuracy. It dates to around 100 BC. And yet, for centuries afterward, nothing even remotely like it appears again in the historical record. How could such advanced engineering exist and then vanish? Mainstream scholars attribute the Antikythera mechanism to the Hellenistic world, possibly designed by a follower of Archimedes or Hipparchus. It reflects a deep understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and mechanical design, suggesting that at least some individuals during that era had a grasp of complex gearwork far beyond what was once believed. But here's the puzzle. No workshop has ever been found. No plans, no references to similar devices, no teacher or student recorded its creation. For all its brilliance, the Antikythera mechanism stands alone. Could it be the product of a civilization or a class of thinkers that we have somehow overlooked? The Greeks, for all their contributions to philosophy and science, left behind no other machine of this sophistication. The Romans, inheritors of the Mediterranean world, built aqueducts and roads, but nothing remotely mechanical on this level. Medieval clockwork would not approach the complexity of Antikythera for over 1,000 years. So, how did it come to be? Was the mechanism a fluke of genius? One brilliant mind centuries ahead of its time? Or was it part of a wider tradition of advanced technology, now lost to fire, conquest, or forgetfulness? A scientific lineage broken before it could spread. Some speculate that the device may be evidence of an isolated workshop, a secret school of craftsmanship in Rhodes or Alexandria, where knowledge was guarded, transmitted only by hand, and ultimately extinguished. Others suggest that it may be a fragment, literally and metaphorically, of a lost civilization, one whose records were destroyed in ancient wars or natural disasters. And there are those who wonder if it was not just a tool of science, but of something more. The Antikythera mechanism does not simply track the moon and sun. It follows cycles, Botonic, Saros, Callipic, patterns that link time, prophecy, and ritual. Some researchers note the inclusion of the Olympiad dial, suggesting the mechanism had a cultural or religious significance. Could it have been used not only to model the cosmos, but to align human activity with celestial rhythms? A sacred device, not just a scientific one. Or perhaps it was both. In many ancient cultures, science and spirituality were inseparable, two lenses viewing the same mysteries. There are even more speculative theories, suggesting the Antikythera mechanism may have roots older than the Greeks, that it was a copy of an earlier device passed down from a forgotten people. Could it be the last surviving artifact of an advanced maritime civilization that once navigated by the stars, charting not only seas, but the skies? There is no evidence to confirm this, and yet, the silence surrounding the mechanism's origin is as telling as what we do know. Why is there only one? Why, in the entire expanse of the ancient world, is there not a single device of similar design recovered from any other site? Why do we find this machine in the ruins of a shipwreck, its creator anonymous, its purpose unknown, its brilliance unmatched? What kind of civilization leaves behind no name, no school, no tradition? Only a single broken voice whispering through gears and rust. Today, the Antikythera mechanism sits in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, encased in glass, studied with X-rays and digital reconstructions. Piece by piece, we have begun to understand how it worked, but not why, not who, not how it came to be, alone in the depths. We continue to scan the seabed, to search ancient libraries, to sift through ruins in hopes of finding a second mechanism, or a mention of its maker. So far, nothing. And so, we are left with one last question. Was the Antikythera mechanism the crowning achievement of a known civilization, or the lone survivor of one we've never truly discovered? From the corroded gears of the Antikythera mechanism, we turn our gaze westward, toward the sunlit shores of the Iberian Peninsula. Here, at the meeting point of the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, between the salt plains and shifting deltas of southern Spain, an ancient whisper lingers in the marshlands. A city of wealth, of trade, of myth. A kingdom that shimmered briefly on the horizon of recorded history, before vanishing almost without a trace. Tartessos. First mentioned by Greek writers as early as the 7th century BC, Tartessos was described as a wealthy and sophisticated civilization, a land rich in silver, gold, and tin. A place of flourishing culture and open trade, situated somewhere near the mouth of the Guadalquivir River. The Greeks spoke of it with admiration. The Carthaginians feared it. And the Romans, centuries later, found only silence. What happened to Tartessos? The sources are few, and none are first-hand. Herodotus called it a kingdom ruled by wise kings, including one named Arganthonios, who reportedly ruled for 80 years and offered refuge to Greek colonists. Strabo placed Tartessos near modern-day Cadiz, while others described it as a port city of immense prosperity, possibly the westernmost limit of the known world at the time. But no ruins have ever been definitively linked to Tartessos. No capital unearthed, no city walls identified beyond doubt. The name disappears from records around the 6th century BC, leaving behind only fragments, cultural artifacts, scattered inscriptions, and a mystery that has puzzled archaeologists for over a century. Could Tartessos have existed, only to vanish so completely? Some believe it was destroyed by a natural disaster, perhaps a tsunami, perhaps a river flood that buried its remains under layers of sediment in the marshy lands of Doñana National Park. Aerial scans have revealed strange geometric anomalies beneath the soil, circles, rectangles, and lines that some interpret as the ghost outlines of an ancient city. Excavations have revealed Phoenician goods, Iberian pottery, and signs of habitation stretching back millennia. But no definitive city has been found. Others suggest that Tartessos may not have been a single city, but a cultural region, a network of settlements and trading hubs connected by shared language, wealth, and belief. If so, its disappearance may have been gradual, a slow assimilation into the growing power of Carthage and later Rome, erasing not only its independence, but its identity. Still, There are those who believe Tartessos may be more than a forgotten kingdom. Some point to tantalizing similarities between Tartessos and Atlantis, the fabled island described by Plato. Both were rich in metals. Both existed beyond the Pillars of Heracles, or what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. Both were said to possess advanced knowledge and trade networks, and both vanished with little explanation. Could it be that the two stories are one? That the myth of Atlantis is a distorted memory of Tartessos, seen through the lens of time and imagination? Mainstream historians urge caution. Correlation, they say, is not causation. The Greeks had many names for distant lands, and their descriptions often blurred fact with fable. Tartessos, they argue, was real, but its grandeur may have been exaggerated by foreign merchants or molded by poetic license. The archaeological record, while suggestive, remains incomplete. And yet, certain questions persist. Why do the ancient accounts of Tartessos speak of metalworking skills far more advanced than neighboring peoples? Why does the name itself, possibly derived from a Semitic root, suggest trade links stretching as far as the Levant? Why do some of the recovered artifacts seem stylistically unique, not clearly Iberian, Phoenician, or Greek, but something in between? Could Tartessos have been a cultural bridge, an independent civilization that blended Mediterranean influences with native innovation, then vanished before its story could be fully told? Or was it something even more elusive, a civilization that never truly existed in the form we imagine? A name spoken by traders for a land they never visited, a mirage formed by scattered myths and scattered wealth. Today, the region once thought to hold Tartessos remains under study. Archaeologists continue to probe the marshes, examining submerged layers of earth and forgotten riverbeds. Each discovery, each shard of pottery or carved stone, brings us closer to an answer. But the full picture remains incomplete. Perhaps the city lies buried under centuries of silt. Perhaps its story survives only in fragments scattered across the museums of Europe. Or perhaps Tartessos never had a capital, never raised temples or towers, but existed only in the minds of those who believed it to be real. So we return to the silence. A kingdom remembered in name, but not in stone. A people whose language is lost, whose stories were never written down, whose legacy survives only in the spaces between what we know and what we wonder. Was Tartessos a glittering hub of ancient trade and knowledge, erased by time and tide? Or was it never truly there at all, an echo mistaken for a voice, a civilization conjured from gold, salt, and myth? And if its ruins still sleep beneath the wetlands, how many other names, how many other cities, have we yet to even imagine? As the echoes of Tartessos fade into the Iberian wetlands, we journey now into the realm of medieval memory, into the myths that mapped the unknown with words as powerful as walls. This is not the story of a city, but of a kingdom. Not one built from stone, but from parchment, belief, and the desperate hopes of a fragmented world. The kingdom of Prester John. For nearly 5 centuries, Europeans searched for this elusive realm, a Christian utopia said to exist somewhere far beyond the known world. Its king, Prester John, was described as a priest and monarch, a ruler of immense wisdom and holiness, commanding a land filled with wealth, strange beasts, and ancient magic. A kingdom untouched by corruption, protected by divine favor, and shielded from the chaos that engulfed Europe in the wake of the Crusades. But no one ever found it. The legend began in the 12th century, when a mysterious letter began circulating in Europe, allegedly written by Prester John himself. In it, he described his land in vivid, almost dreamlike terms: rivers of gems, fountains of youth, and beasts both fantastic and familiar. The kingdom, he claimed, was home to the 10 lost tribes of Israel, and bordered the lands of Gog and Magog. It was a place where Christianity flourished in peace, unthreatened by heresy or war. To a Europe weary of religious strife, Muslim expansion, and internal division, the letter was more than myth. It was hope. It promised not just an ally in the East, but a mirror of Christian idealism. A world where faith and power worked in perfect harmony. But where was this kingdom? Early accounts placed it in India, then a vague term for the far reaches of Asia. Some believed Prester John ruled lands beyond Persia, in the depths of Central Asia, possibly as a descendant of the Magi who visited Christ. Marco Polo heard tales of it during his travels, but could find no trace. Later, as geographical knowledge shifted, the kingdom moved with the maps, relocated first to the highlands of Central Asia, then to the Horn of Africa, and finally to Ethiopia. And it was there that myth briefly collided with reality. In the 14th and 15th centuries, European travelers encountered the Christian kingdom of Ethiopia, ruled by a line of kings claiming descent from the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon. To many, this was enough. Ethiopia became Prester John's kingdom. The myth reshaped the reality, and for a time, it suited both sides. But Ethiopia was no utopia. Though Christian, it was isolated, politically complex, and vulnerable. It did not have rivers of gold or fountains of immortality, and it was certainly not waiting to rise as a savior of Christendom. So the legend shifted again. The real Ethiopia became too small to contain it. The kingdom of Prester John slipped back into the margins, reimagined, relocated, or dismissed entirely. Why then did the myth persist? Some scholars suggest that Prester John was never meant to be a real figure, but a symbol, a psychological projection of European desires for spiritual and political renewal. Others argue that the original letter was a forgery, a literary creation intended to inspire or manipulate. But even as maps became more accurate and continents filled in, the search continued. As late as the 17th century, explorers still embarked with the hope of finding his kingdom. What if, instead of being a lie, Prester John was a distortion, an echo of a now lost culture or kingdom that once thrived beyond the reach of European chroniclers? Could the tale be a misremembered memory of a remote Christian enclave in Asia? A conflation of different cultures, misunderstood through the fog of distance, language, and time? Or was Prester John something else entirely? Some theorists suggest the myth may have been a coded survival of older legends, perhaps from Manichaean, Nestorian, or even pre-Christian traditions, layered into a Christian framework by scribes who needed to believe in an otherworldly protector. A spiritual archetype, not just a geopolitical hope. Others speculate that the myth of Prester John masked real but hidden societies, isolated theocracies or tribal cultures never fully documented. We know that Christian communities once existed as far east as China and as far south as Sudan. Could one of them have inspired the legend? There is, of course, no solid evidence, no capital city, no scepter, no verified letters. Just variations on a name, glimpses in manuscripts, and the yearning of a continent for a kingdom that could never be conquered, only imagined. Today, the myth of Prester John survives mostly as a historical curiosity. Footnotes in medieval texts, speculative maps drawn with exaggerated confidence, names inscribed in fading ink. But something about it lingers, perhaps because it asks questions still relevant today. What do we long to believe in when the world seems broken? What hidden civilizations do we invent, out there or within ourselves, to restore a sense of balance, justice, or meaning? Was Prester John ever real? Or was he always a mirror, reflecting what the world wished it could find? And if his kingdom never existed in stone or soil, did it still shape history in its absence? Somewhere in the folds of forgotten deserts, or forested mountains, or perhaps just in the corners of old mines and older maps, the question remains, quiet, unanswered. Who was Prester John? And what was it we were truly searching for? As the legend of Prester John fades into the shadows of forgotten maps and half-remembered letters, we travel back further still, into the twilight of prehistory, where the line between history and myth was not yet drawn. Our next mystery lies not in the imagination of medieval Europe, but in the stone-carved records of ancient Egypt, where pharaohs inscribed their journeys to a place both sacred and strange. They called it Punt, Ta Netcher, the land of the god. It was a place of wonder, spoken of with reverence and longing, a distant land of incense and gold, of exotic animals, fragrant myrrh trees, and ebony wood. Egyptian texts describe it as a land of wealth, peace, and divine connection. And yet, no one knows where it was, or if it ever existed at all. Most of what we know about Punt comes from reliefs and inscriptions in Egyptian temples. The most famous among them are found in the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahari, dating to the 15th century BC. There, stone walls come alive with detailed images of the pharaoh's expedition, ships laden with goods, men offering gifts, trees in baskets to be replanted in Egyptian soil. There is even a depiction of the Puntite queen, unusually large, distinctly drawn, her form unlike any other figure in Egyptian art. And yet, for all this vivid imagery, the Egyptians never tell us exactly where Punt was. No coordinates, no maps, just reverent descriptions of a place that lay to the south, across the Red Sea, or perhaps farther still. So where was this land of divine trade? Some scholars believe it was located in modern-day Eritrea or Somalia. Others point to Sudan, Yemen, or parts of the Arabian Peninsula. All of these regions have, at different times, been identified as potential sites of Punt. They offer tantalizing clues, ancient trade routes, archaeological remains, botanical evidence, but nothing conclusive. No ruins of Punt have been found. No temples, no tombs, no written language, no self-identifying artifact that says, with certainty, we were here. Could it be that Punt was not a single location, but a network of trade outposts along the southern coasts, a cultural zone rather than a nation? Perhaps the Egyptians referred to Punt the way we might refer to the Orient, a region colored by trade, mystery, and projection. Or perhaps it was a memory, an ancestral homeland reimagined over generations, whose real location had already faded by the time the pharaohs wrote about it. And then, there are more speculative voices. Some have suggested that Punt was more than just a trading partner, that it represented a sacred mirror to Egypt, its equal in mystery and reverence. Could it have been the origin of Egyptian spiritual knowledge, as some esoteric traditions propose? A land not just of goods, but of gods. Others go further still, proposing that Punt may have been an ancient civilization, now entirely lost, its ruins swallowed by desert or sea, its memory preserved only through Egypt's longing. Could it have been a remnant of an earlier age, perhaps a forgotten offshoot of the first great African cultures, or a people descended from a prehistoric civilization that vanished without a trace? There is also a curious pattern in the Egyptian texts. The expeditions to Punt are spaced far apart, decades, sometimes centuries. This suggests not a steady trade relationship, but a sporadic, almost mythical journey. As if Punt were not merely far, but difficult to find. Could its location have shifted with changing coastlines, political upheaval, or the slow drift of oral memory? And what of the goods brought back? Incense, gold, animal skins, strange animals like baboons and giraffes, and trees that thrived in Egypt's foreign gardens. These were not ordinary imports. They were ceremonial, symbolic, even sacred. Egypt did not just trade with Punt, it venerated it. But why? Perhaps Punt was remembered not for its power, but for what it represented, a place untouched, unspoiled, beyond the grasp of time. A land of beginnings, older than empire, where the gods still walked among mortals. Could the Egyptians have preserved the myth of Punt precisely because they needed it? A spiritual counterbalance to their structured, ordered world. Mainstream archaeology continues to search. Remote sensing surveys, ancient DNA analysis, and renewed digs in coastal regions may one day bring clarity. But for now, the trail remains elusive. The images at Deir el-Bahari remain our most vivid window. Artistic, yes, but also precise, detailed, and purposeful. Someone went there. Something was brought back. And then, the silence. No Puntite language, no rulers, no known descendants. Just a place described as real, documented in the language of gods and kings, but never fully found. So once again, we are left standing at the threshold of history, where the known fades into the unknown. Was Punt a real kingdom, buried beneath layers of time, waiting to be rediscovered? Or was it always a reflection in the Nile, a vision of paradise drawn not from geography, but from the collective memory of a people searching for the sacred? And if we still haven't found it, what other names, what other lands, might still lie waiting on the far edge of our understanding? As the faint echoes of Punt vanish into the sands of northeast Africa, we move inland, into the rugged hills of southeastern Turkey, where wind brushes over dry grass and stones rest half-buried in the soil. Here, on a barren slope once thought to be unremarkable, lies a place that has forced historians and archaeologists to rethink everything they thought they knew about the origins of civilization. Göbekli Tepe. At first glance, it looks like a scattering of ancient stones. But as the dust is brushed away, a staggering complexity is revealed. Massive T-shaped pillars, some over 16 feet tall and weighing more than 10 tons, arranged in concentric circles, each carved with elegant depictions of animals: lions, vultures, scorpions, snakes. The stones bear no inscriptions, no writing, no signs of metallurgy. And yet, they stand in deliberate formations, aligned and patterned, echoing a purpose that remains unclear. But what makes Göbekli Tepe so extraordinary is not just its form, it's its age. Carbon dating places the construction of the earliest layers at around 9,600 BC. That is more than 11,000 years ago. Before the invention of the wheel, before agriculture, before pottery or cities, before, as far as we know, any organized religion or written mythology. It predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the pyramids of Egypt by nearly 7,000. So who built it, and how? The builders of Göbekli Tepe left no names, no graves, no trace of their language or tools or society. Just these towering stones, carefully arranged, then buried under their own debris. The site itself was intentionally backfilled, sealed as if to preserve or protect it from time. For decades, this slope was thought to be just another hill. Only recently has the true scale of the site begun to emerge. Mainstream archaeologists believe the builders were hunter-gatherers, long before the development of settled agricultural life. This alone is revolutionary. It challenges the long-held belief that only farming made large-scale construction and organized religion possible. Göbekli Tepe turns that idea on its head. Perhaps, instead, it was the building of sacred monuments that led humans to settle, farm, and create complex societies. But that leads to deeper questions. How did pre-agricultural people, with no known domestic animals or metal tools, quarry, transport, and erect such enormous stones? Why invest such extraordinary effort in a ceremonial site, possibly spanning hundreds of years, without leaving behind evidence of everyday life. No houses have been found, no fields, no bones of livestock, only ritual spaces. Was this a seasonal gathering place, a shared religious site for scattered tribes, or something even more enigmatic? A temple built by a culture far more advanced than we thought possible for its time. Some scholars speculate that Göbekli Tepe may have served as a kind of pilgrimage center, a ritual heart of early humanity. The carvings, dense with symbolism, may have held cosmological meaning, perhaps recording the movement of stars, the cycle of seasons, or myths now lost. Others argue that the animals depicted were totemic, tied to clans or spirits in a now vanished system of belief. And still, there are more speculative voices. Alternative theories suggest the builders may not have been local at all. That Göbekli Tepe is the legacy of a forgotten high culture. Perhaps the survivors of an earlier lost civilization that predates even the most generous estimates for human social complexity. Some have connected it to the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, a controversial theory proposing that a cataclysmic event around 10,800 BC triggered global climate shifts and mass extinctions. Could the builders of Göbekli Tepe have been responding to a disaster, preserving knowledge in stone? There is even speculation that Göbekli Tepe was not a beginning, but an echo, a final effort to memorialize something already ending. A place where memory was carved into stone because paper, language, or city walls had already been swept away. Of course, these ideas remain unproven. The archaeological community, while intrigued, continues to uncover the site layer by layer. With each new find comes more context, but also more complexity. Beneath Göbekli Tepe lie even older levels, still unexplored. What lies beneath may be even stranger than what we see today. And yet, one truth remains clear. The people who built Göbekli Tepe were not primitive. They were skilled, coordinated, visionary. They moved with purpose and belief, using only stone and willpower to reshape the earth around them. They stood in the twilight between ice and fire, hunter and settler, and raised monuments that would outlast everything they knew. But who were they? Where did they go? And why did they bury the very thing they had built? Perhaps the answers are still hidden beneath the soil. Or perhaps Göbekli Tepe is not meant to be fully understood, only to remind us how little we truly know about our beginnings. If this was the work of a people who never left a name, who never built cities or empires, what else might lie buried, waiting for us to notice? And if they could do this, what else were they capable of? From the weathered stones of Göbekli Tepe, monuments built by a people we cannot name, we now follow a thread that leads not into prehistory, but into the heart of one of the world's most enduring religious mysteries. A story not of stone, but of disappearance. A story that begins in ancient Israel, but soon spirals outward into every corner of the world. This is the mystery of the 10 lost tribes of Israel. According to the Hebrew Bible, the nation of Israel was once divided into 12 tribes, each descended from the sons of Jacob. For centuries, these tribes lived in the land of Canaan, forming a confederation. Then later, a united monarchy under Saul, David, and Solomon. But after Solomon's death, the kingdom fractured, 10 of the tribes forming the northern kingdom of Israel, while 2 remained in the south, in the kingdom of Judah. Then, in 722 BC, everything changed. The Assyrian Empire invaded the north. The cities of Israel fell one by one, and the people were taken into exile, dispersed throughout the vast territories of the Assyrian realm. And in the records that followed, those 10 tribes seemed to vanish. Judah survived. Its people were later exiled to Babylon, but returned. They rebuilt Jerusalem. They kept their identity. They became what we know today as the Jewish people. But the northern tribes, Reuben, Simeon, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, and Manasseh, were never heard from again. Or were they? The search for the lost tribes began almost immediately. Ancient texts speculated on their fate. Some claimed they had settled beyond the Euphrates. Others spoke of a hidden land, separated from the world by a great river or mountain range, where the tribes still lived in isolation, waiting for a return. As centuries passed, the legend grew. In the Middle Ages, Jewish, Christian, and Islamic sources alike pondered their whereabouts. Some said the tribes had traveled east, into Persia or India. Others believed they had migrated north, into the Caucasus or beyond. In the 16th and 17th centuries, explorers, missionaries, and scholars began to link indigenous groups around the world to the lost tribes. In Ethiopia, the Beta Israel community, an ancient Jewish group with its own rituals and oral traditions, was seen by some as a surviving remnant. In India, the Bani Israel and B'nai Menashe tribes claim descent from Manasseh. In Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Pashtun people were said to carry names and customs reminiscent of ancient Israel. Even Native American tribes, such as the Iroquois and Navajo, were at one point suggested to be possible descendants based on perceived linguistic or ritual similarities. Could it be that the 10 tribes did not vanish, but scattered, their identities evolving over millennia in faraway lands? Genetic studies have provided limited support for some of these claims, offering tantalizing hints of shared ancestry in a few populations, but nothing definitive. The lack of consistent textual or archaeological evidence keeps the mystery just out of reach. Others believe the answer may be more symbolic than literal. Some scholars argue that the tribes were not lost at all, but assimilated, absorbed into other peoples, their lineage disappearing not by exile, but by blending into the fabric of history. In this view, the lost tribes represent a kind of spiritual longing, a yearning for wholeness, for unity, for the regathering of what was broken. And yet, the mystery persists. Because the idea of the lost tribes has power. It has shaped empires, inspired messianic movements, and influenced political decisions. The Portuguese, during the Age of Exploration, sent expeditions in part hoping to find them. In 17th century England, Puritan theologians linked the British people to the tribe of Ephraim. In modern times, entire communities have converted to Judaism under the belief that they are descendants of Israel's lost children. And then there is prophecy. Some religious traditions, both Jewish and Christian, believe the 10 tribes will one day return, reunited with Judah at the end of days. Their reappearance is tied not to archaeology or anthropology, but to destiny. But what if they were never 10 distinct, isolated populations to begin with? What if the biblical account itself is not a precise historical record, but a layered narrative, blending history, theology, and myth? Could the concept of the lost tribes be more a reflection of ancient identity struggles, rather than the record of a real exile? Or perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between, part memory, part metaphor, part historical fact. Across the deserts of Iran, the highlands of Ethiopia, the forests of India, and the mountains of Central Asia, whispers still echo. Songs sung in unfamiliar tongues, rituals whose origins have been forgotten, names passed down that resemble ancient Hebrew. Are these the voices of the lost, or coincidences waiting to be confirmed? So we return to the question that has haunted the ages. Where did they go? Did the 10 tribes vanish into the sands of time, assimilated, erased, remembered only in name? Or did they survive in the shadows, scattering like seeds across the earth, quietly living out stories no longer recognized as part of Israel's own? And if one day they are found, truly found, what would that mean for the story of civilization as we know it? Or is the very idea of their return just another myth? a mirror reflecting our own desire to believe that nothing precious is ever truly lost. As the mystery of the 10 lost tribes dissolves into the shifting mists of faith and time, we move deeper into the ancient world, into the cradle of writing, kingship, and myth. The land of Sumer, where stories were first etched in clay, speaks of many cities and many gods. But among these tales, there is one name that stands apart, a city said to have existed before Ura, before Uruk, older even than legend. Aratta. Mentioned in a handful of Sumerian literary texts, Aratta appears not in history books, but in epic poetry, chiefly in the myths surrounding the great king Enmerkar and the goddess Inanna. In these tales, Aratta is a distant, shining land, a place of high mountains, abundant minerals, and unmatched craftsmanship. Its people, though unknown, are skilled in metalwork and lapidary art. Their city is fortified, their temples rich with offerings. They possess treasures the likes of which even the lords of Uruk covet. But Aratta's exact location? Lost. Unlike Ur or Eridu, no archaeological site has ever been definitively linked to it. No stone has been unearthed bearing its name. No ruins rise from the plains of Mesopotamia to mark where it stood. And yet, it is spoken of again and again in Sumerian literature as a rival, a source of divine wealth, and a destination of great peril. Was Aratta a real place? Some scholars believe so. They argue that the repeated references to Aratta in early texts point not to mere fiction, but to a cultural memory, perhaps a trade partner in the Iranian plateau, or a mountain kingdom that once provided the Sumerians with precious goods. Others suggest it might correspond to early settlements in the region of Jiroft, in southeastern Iran, where archaeological discoveries have unearthed intricate artifacts and early signs of urban life. Could Aratta have been one of these cities, known by a different name, buried under centuries of sediment and silence? The Enmerkar epics describe a long and dangerous journey to reach Aratta, over rivers and mountains, through enemy territory, far beyond the familiar lands of Sumer. These distances suggest a location outside the floodplains of the Tigris and Euphrates, perhaps in the Zagros Mountains, or deeper into the Iranian highlands. And yet, the trail is cold. No inscriptions from other cultures mention Aratta. No known language or text outside of Sumeria references its existence. It is a city described only by those who never seem to reach it. Messengers and kings who send envoys, make demands, and invoke the will of gods, but never stand at its gates. Always it is far, always it is rich, and always it resists. Could Aratta be less a place and more a symbol? To the Sumerians, it may have represented a spiritual opposite, a land of raw, untamed abundance, contrasted with the ordered, irrigated cities of the south. A mirror of Sumerian desire and anxiety. In this view, Aratta is the wild richness of the mountains, the chaos of the frontier, the dream of divine wealth just out of reach. But then again, why such detail? Why the elaborate negotiations, the poetic exchanges, the rituals to win over Inanna's favor? Why the precise descriptions of jewels, metals, and gates of lapis lazuli? The texts don't treat Aratta like a fantasy. They treat it like a rival, a challenge, a city equal in stature, if not in proximity. There are other clues. Some researchers have pointed out linguistic peculiarities in the Enmerkar texts, phrases that suggest translation or intercultural dialogue. One myth even tells of a confusion of tongues, a moment when language itself was scrambled, requiring new invention to bridge the gap. Could this be an echo of early contact between Sumerians and another sophisticated people, now forgotten? Or is it more ancient still? Some fringe theorists have speculated that Aratta predates even Sumer itself, that it may have been the source of their early cultural and technological advances. a hidden mother civilization existing in the shadow of myth. These ideas remain speculative, without physical evidence, but they draw strength from a deeper truth. The first chapters of civilization remain hazy, their edges blurred. Göbekli Tepe reminds us that monumental architecture existed long before settled cities. Could Aratta have been a cultural bridge, linking those early spiritual centers to the dawn of kingship in Sumer? A lost predecessor, remembered only in myth because its memory outlasted its stones. And if Aratta was real, why was it erased? Was it destroyed in a war never recorded? Did its people migrate, assimilate, or vanish into the mountains from which they came? Or was it always intended to be unreachable, less a city and more a horizon? So we are left, again, with silence. Aratta lives only in clay tablets, in lines of poetry from 4,000 years ago. Its wealth is imagined, its walls unmeasured. And yet, it continues to call. Was Aratta the jewel of the East, a real kingdom, hidden in the folds of time? Or was it a dream conjured by the earliest poets, drawn from longing and divine distance? And if somewhere, beneath the dust of forgotten lands, its stones still lie, how many other cities might wait, undiscovered, in the space between myth and memory, as the distant echoes of Aratta fade into the mythic highlands of ancient Mesopotamia? We turn our gaze east, toward the vast Indian subcontinent, where the early morning sun rises over the mist-covered banks of the Sarasvati River, long since vanished, yet whispered about in sacred verse. Here lies a civilization that some believe has been hidden, not by time, but by our understanding of time itself. A world not only ancient, but impossibly ancient. This is the mystery of the Vedic super-civilization. The earliest references to this lost world are found in the Rig Veda, a text older than Homer, older than the pyramids. Composed in Sanskrit, the Rig Veda is not a history book, yet within its hymns are glimpses of cities, advanced rituals, complex cosmologies, and even, some say, technology that challenges modern interpretations of the ancient world. The mainstream view places the Vedic culture in the 2nd millennium BC, emerging after the decline of the Indus Valley civilization. It speaks of a semi-nomadic society evolving gradually from pastoral traditions into settled agriculture and organized kingdoms. But others have asked, what if the Vedas are not a beginning, but a remnant? Across India, the remains of the Indus Valley civilization, also called the Harappan civilization, paint the picture of a vast urban culture that thrived between 2600 and 1900 BC. With advanced drainage systems, standardized weights, and hints of sophisticated governance, it stands as one of the great Bronze Age civilizations. And yet, its script remains undeciphered, its language unknown, its connection to the Vedic texts ambiguous. Could the Vedas be the memory of a civilization even older than Harappa, or part of a continuum that stretched back further than we dare imagine? Some researchers point to references in the Vedic texts to cities with 100 walls, aerial chariots called vimanas, and weapons that resemble modern conceptions of energy-based warfare. One passage describes a weapon, blazing with the fire of 1,000 suns. Another, a blast that turned men to ash and caused birds to fall from the sky. Are these poetic metaphors, mythological flourishes, or faded memories of something very real? Mainstream scholars interpret these verses symbolically. They see the Vedas as spiritual texts, using imagery to convey moral or cosmological truths. Yet the specificity of some descriptions has drawn speculation from outside academic circles. In the 20th century, thinkers like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, and later researchers in the alternative history community, began to argue that the Vedic texts preserve echoes of an advanced civilization, lost not to conquest, but to cataclysm. Could there have been a pre-Ice Age civilization on the Indian subcontinent? One capable of remarkable technological feats, whose wisdom was passed down orally until it crystallized in the Vedas. Satellite imagery has revealed long dry riverbeds, including what may be the legendary Sarasvati, described in the Vedas as a mighty river lost in time. If this is true, it suggests the Vedic composers were recalling a landscape that predated their own by thousands of years. A landscape that was already ancient by the time history began. And then there is Dwarka. According to Hindu tradition, Dwarka was a city founded by the god Krishna, a place of splendor built near the sea. Today, ruins off the coast of modern-day Dwarka in Gujarat suggest the presence of submerged structures. Marine archaeology has uncovered stone blocks, possible wall foundations, and indications of man-made design. Some claim these to be evidence of a lost port city from a forgotten age. Could this be a remnant of the Vedic world, one swallowed by the sea during dramatic climatic shifts around 2000 BC? Or are we projecting myth onto stones shaped by more recent history? Perhaps most compelling is the structure and content of the Vedas themselves. Unlike other ancient texts, they exhibit extraordinary mathematical precision. Vedic meters, hymn structures, and cosmological numbers reflect an understanding of astronomy and cycles far beyond their time. The yugas, or ages of time, describe vast epochs stretching into hundreds of thousands, even millions of years. Were these simply symbolic spans, or attempts to preserve memories of cycles long forgotten? Some argue that ancient Indian tradition never saw time as linear, that the Vedas were not composed by one generation, but compiled from a much older oral tradition. Each line a transmission of knowledge echoing through the ages. Could it be that the rishis, or seers, credited with composing the Vedas, were not only philosophers, but the last inheritors of a civilization that preceded recorded history? Of course, caution is warranted. Myth and memory blur easily. Archaeology demands physical evidence. The tools of science are limited when faced with texts that are sacred, symbolic, and layered across millennia. And yet, the mystery persists. How could such refined cosmology emerge so early? Why do the Vedas describe cities and rituals in such structured detail if they were born in a pastoral society? Why does the ancient text seem to hint, again and again, at a knowledge that feels borrowed from something far older? Was there truly a Vedic super-civilization, hidden in the folds of myth and time, whose legacy lives not in stone, but in sound? And if so, what else have we overlooked? The banks of the Sarasvati may have dried, and the cities of the Indus may have crumbled, but the Vedas still sing. Their verses travel from mouth to ear, from generation to generation, like echoes calling back from an age we cannot fully see. And so we are left to wonder, did the Vedas preserve not only philosophy, but the final whispers of a forgotten world? One that lived before history, before kings, before time itself. As the sacred hymns of the Vedas echo into silence, we travel beyond the familiar reaches of ancient text, into the mist-shrouded mountains of Western China, where a lesser-known enigma rests not in temples or monuments, but in stone discs scattered across the highlands of mystery and myth. This is the story of the Dropa stones, and the strange tale of the civilization that may, or may not, have created them. The story begins in 1938, when a Chinese expedition led by Professor Chi Pu Te reportedly explored a series of caves in the Bayanhar Mountains, near the border between China and Tibet. Deep within these caverns, they claim to have discovered dozens of stone discs, each roughly a foot across, flat, with a perfectly round hole in the center. But these were not ordinary stones. Each was etched with a faint, spiraling groove, like a phonograph record, containing minuscule carvings said to be writing of an unknown kind. A total of 716 discs, they said, were uncovered. Mysterious, silent, unlike anything known to local tradition. And the message they carried, if the story is to be believed, was stranger still. Decades later, in the 1960s, a Russian researcher named Dr. Vyacheslav Syzev published a summary of the Dropa discovery in a Soviet science magazine. He claimed that the inscriptions, once deciphered by a Chinese professor named Tsum Nui, told the story of a race of beings, the Dropa, who came from another star system, crash-landed on Earth thousands of years ago, and were stranded in the mountains. Rejected by the local tribes, they were hunted, misunderstood, and eventually died out. But not before leaving behind a record of their journey. It reads like science fiction. And for many, that's all it ever was. There is no record of Professor Chi Putei's original expedition in Chinese archives. No academic confirmation of Tsum Nui's existence. The museum where the Dropa stones were allegedly stored, the Banpo Museum in Xi'an, has never displayed such artifacts, and no peer-reviewed journal has ever published photos or detailed studies of the discs. So, did they exist at all? Skeptics argue that the Dropa stones are an elaborate hoax, fabricated by Cold War-era tabloids eager for otherworldly headlines. The photos that have circulated, often grainy and undated, show stone discs that could be natural formations, or even ritual objects from known cultures. And yet, despite the lack of verifiable evidence, the story persists. Why? Because something about the Dropa stones touches a deeper mystery. There are indeed ancient disc-shaped stones found throughout China. Objects with holes in the center, sometimes associated with burial sites or ceremonial uses. Their presence is not in doubt. What remains unclear is whether any of them contain inscriptions, and if so, what they might mean. Some researchers have pointed to the possibility of microscopic carvings that escape detection. Others suggest the stones, if real, could have encoded early pictographic or symbolic language, now forgotten. Then, there are the oral traditions. Among the isolated Dropka and Ham tribes of the region, small communities of Tibetan origin, some early 20th century explorers noted cultural oddities, unique physical traits, unfamiliar dialects, and mythologies that referenced beings who came from the sky. Are these just fragments of local folklore, or the faint echoes of a forgotten people? Could it be that the Dropa stones are not a record of alien visitors, but the legacy of an ancient, marginalized culture? One so distant in time and worldview that its artifacts, if misinterpreted, seem alien by default? Or is the opposite true? Could the story be a fabrication built around a kernel of truth? Misunderstood objects, misrepresented events, repackaged as myth in the age of flying saucers and cosmic speculation. The Dropa tale, like many stories on the edge of archaeology, sits in a strange liminal space, neither confirmed nor fully disproven. It lacks hard evidence, yet clings to cultural memory. It has no place in academic history, yet it refuses to disappear. And perhaps this is what makes it so compelling. For in the remote highlands of Tibet, where cloud banks drift across hidden valleys and ancient footpaths wind through the silence, it is not difficult to imagine a people forgotten by time, a culture whose symbols and stories, etched in stone, remain unread simply because we do not yet know how to read them. What were the Dropa stones? Simple ritual objects, misidentified fossils, an elaborate hoax born of Cold War intrigue? Or could they be something more, an encoded message from a civilization that has slipped between the cracks of history? Until the stones themselves resurface, until a verifiable analysis is made, we are left only with questions. Are we projecting modern myths onto ancient stones? Or have we glimpsed a truth too strange for conventional history, one that remains half buried in mountains, waiting for the right eyes to see. And if the Dropa stones do exist, who carved them? And what were they really trying to say? As the enigmatic Dropa stones dissolve into the high mists of the Himalayas, we journey westward, toward the heart of the European continent, where the rivers of the Balkans carve quiet paths through forests and fields. Here, beneath layers of silt and forgotten time, archaeologists have unearthed fragments of a society that does not fit neatly into the timeline of known civilizations. A culture whose sophistication seems to rise out of nowhere, and whose identity, despite decades of study, remains veiled in ambiguity. This is the mystery of the Vinca civilization. The story begins near the banks of the Danube River, in what is now modern-day Serbia. In 1908, on the outskirts of a village named Vinca, archaeologist Miloje Vasic uncovered the remains of a Neolithic settlement unlike anything previously seen in Europe. What he found defied expectations: intricately decorated ceramics, stylized figurines with elongated faces and almond-shaped eyes, and, most curiously, rows of symbols carved onto tablets, tools, and shards of pottery. These symbols were unlike anything known at the time. They were not pictographs. They were not decorative. They seemed intentional, systematic. And they appeared centuries, even millennia, before the rise of cuneiform in Sumer, which has long been considered the birthplace of writing. Was this Europe's forgotten script? The Vinca symbols, as they came to be known, date back as far as 5700 BC, predating Mesopotamian writing systems by over 2,000 years. Found not just in Serbia, but across a vast region of southeastern Europe, they suggest the presence of a remarkably advanced society, one that built permanent settlements, cultivated the land, created art, and perhaps even developed a system of proto-writing. And yet, there is no consensus. Many scholars remain cautious. They argue that the Vinca symbols do not represent a true writing system, but rather a form of symbolic communication, a pre-literate script used for ritual, ownership, or identification. Still, the density, structure, and recurrence of these signs continue to challenge that interpretation. Could the people of the Vinca culture have developed a written language and then lost it? Or were they part of a larger, now forgotten civilization whose influence rippled across Neolithic Europe before vanishing completely? The artifacts left behind add further intrigue. The ceramic figurines found at Vinca sites often have an otherworldly appearance, stylized, abstract, and unusually expressive for Neolithic art. Some have likened their features to beings from myth, or even from speculative extraterrestrial lore, though no serious archaeological theory supports such claims. But there is something undeniably strange about the aesthetic of Vinca art, something that suggests a worldview we no longer understand. Their settlements were also ahead of their time. Large, organized, and planned, with evidence of metallurgy as early as 5000 BC, long before copper smelting became common elsewhere. These people were not primitive farmers eking out survival. They were builders, artists, thinkers. So why did they disappear? By around 4500 BC, the Vinca culture began to decline. Its symbols faded, its cities emptied. There is no clear record of conquest or natural disaster. No burned layers, no sudden shifts, just a quiet vanishing. Some theories point to overexploitation of resources. Others suggest migration, cultural absorption, or even internal collapse. But none offer a full explanation. And so, as is often the case with civilizations on the edge of memory, speculation begins to fill the silence. Could the Vinca have been part of a forgotten chapter in the story of human civilization? An early experiment in urban life, an abstract thought that rose too early and fell too soon? Were they ancestors of the later Indo-European cultures? Or were they something separate, a civilization with no direct descendants, swallowed by the long river of time. There are even those who suggest that the Vinca script may have influenced later writing systems, perhaps carried east through trade or migration, eventually finding echoes in the symbols of Sumer or the glyphs of the Indus. These ideas remain unproven, but they linger, fed by the possibility that history, as we know it, may be built upon older, buried foundations. Mainstream archaeology, for all its discipline, still wrestles with the meaning of the Vinca legacy. The artifacts are real, the settlements carefully excavated, the symbols undeniably intentional. And yet, without decipherment, without texts, without names, the people themselves remain silent. What was the purpose of their symbols? Were they counting, praying, telling stories, or leaving behind a language that we have simply forgotten how to read? In the soil of the Balkans, the pieces remain: fragmented tablets, stylized eyes, a quiet echo of voices no longer heard. And so, the question stands: did the Vinca people build the first steps towards civilization in Europe, only to vanish before the world knew their name? Or are they the shadows of a lost civilization? One that flickered briefly with light, then disappeared, leaving only symbols for us to ponder, and a mystery still waiting to be understood. From the fading symbols of the Vinca people, etched into clay and obscured by time, we descend once more into the birthplace of civilization itself, to the marshy plains of ancient Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates once carried the pulse of the world's first cities. Before Sumer, before Akkad, there was another people, one whose legacy lies not in towering ziggurats or grand epics, but in a handful of strange silent figurines. This is the mystery of the Ubaid lizard people. The Ubaid culture flourished in southern Mesopotamia between 6,500 and 3,800 BC, long before the great dynasties of Sumer rose from the dust. Their settlements, found in places like Tel al-Ubaid, Eridu, and Ur, reveal a people who built temples, organized irrigation, and laid the foundations for later urban life in the region. In many ways, the Ubaid represent the quiet prelude to the symphony of civilization. But among their relics is something that doesn't quite belong. Dozens of figurines, sculpted from clay and stone, have been uncovered at Ubaid sites. Many are human in form, detailed, delicate, posed, but some are different. Some have elongated heads, slanted eyes, tapered snouts, and reptilian features. These are not naturalistic depictions. They are not stylized representations of ordinary humans. They appear alien. Even more unsettling are the postures. Some of the lizard-headed figures are shown holding infants. Others sit with hands on knees in positions of meditation or authority. A few wear what appear to be helmets or ornate headgear. They are depicted with purpose, posed, symbolic, almost ceremonial. What were these figures meant to represent? Mainstream archaeologists have long interpreted them as stylized idols, possibly representing gods, spirits, or mythic beings. In early agricultural societies, anthropomorphic deities were often shaped to reflect symbolic traits: fertility, strength, mystery. The reptilian features may have represented transformation, birth, or an element of the natural world now lost to our understanding. And yet, no inscriptions name them. No accompanying texts explain their purpose. No myths from later Mesopotamian traditions describe gods that look like this. Why would a culture at the dawn of organized life carve humanoid beings with reptilian faces? Some researchers propose that these figurines are remnants of a forgotten belief system, perhaps tied to an early cult, one that vanished before writing could preserve its myths. Others suggest the figurines may not represent gods at all, but a class of priests, midwives, or masked figures involved in ritual or medicine. The helmets, the posture, the infants, all hint at possible roles lost in translation. But then come the more speculative theories. Some fringe historians and theorists argue that the Ubaid lizard people represent more than myth, that they are depictions of beings who once lived among early humans. These theorists point to global myths of serpent-like deities, dragons in China, Nagas in India, Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica, and suggest that a hidden, reptilian race may have once walked the earth, remembered in art and legend long after they vanished. Others take the idea further, proposing contact with non-human intelligences, perhaps visitors from elsewhere, whose presence in the ancient world left behind a trail of reptilian imagery and unexplained artifacts. These ideas are not supported by the archaeological community, but they persist, fed by the mystery and the eerie gaze of the figurines themselves. Still, the material facts remain simple and unresolved. The figurines are real. They are old. They are unlike anything else found in the region. And then, just as suddenly as they appear, they are gone. By the time Sumer rises, the Ubaid culture has faded. The reptilian figures are no longer made. The temples are rebuilt in new styles. New gods are named. The strange idols are buried, forgotten. Why? Did the belief system collapse? Was it absorbed, rejected, or abandoned? Or did the Ubaid figurines never hold the meaning we assigned to them? Were they mere symbols, misread through the lens of our own desire for mystery? Even now, there is no consensus. The figurines remain isolated, without texts, without direct lineage, without context. Were they gods? Were they ancestors? Were they warnings? The Ubaid left no answers, only forms, only eyes that do not blink, hands that cradle, faces that do not resemble ours, and silence. So we are left with questions. Why would a culture at the threshold of civilization give such careful attention to beings that look nothing like themselves? What inspired these forms? And if they were simply artistic invention, why do they feel so deliberate? The Ubaid lizard people may never be fully explained, but in their ambiguity lies their power. They are a mirror, reflecting our longing to understand the unknowable, and perhaps a whisper from a chapter of human history that was never meant to be remembered. From the quiet enigma of the Ubaid figurines, those lizard-faced beings whose purpose still eludes us, we journey now into the green heart of the Balkans. Here, nestled in the rolling hills of central Bosnia, a group of mountains rises from the landscape with uncanny symmetry. Too symmetrical, some say. Too precise to be natural. These are not just hills, claim the believers. They are pyramids, ancient, monumental, and possibly the oldest on Earth. This is the mystery of the Bosnian pyramids, and the civilization that may, or may not, have built them. It began in 2005, when Bosnian-American archaeologist Samir Osmanagic announced a bold theory that the hill known as Visočica, near the town of Visoko, was not a natural formation, but a massive, man-made pyramid. According to Osmanagic, its geometric slopes, flat triangular faces, and near-perfect alignment to the cardinal points all pointed to intentional design. And not just any design. He claimed it was the largest pyramid in the world, higher than Egypt's Great Pyramid of Giza, and potentially far older. Soon, he expanded his claim. Visočica, he argued, was just one of several pyramids in a sprawling complex that included the Pyramid of the Moon, the Pyramid of the Dragon, and even underground tunnels linking them all. The site quickly gained international attention. Supporters hailed it as a discovery that could rewrite the history of human civilization. Detractors dismissed it as pseudoscience. The debate was immediate, passionate, and unresolved. So, what exactly was found? Excavations around the base of Visočica revealed layers of stone blocks and terraces that, to the untrained eye, did seem orderly, structured even. In the nearby Ravana tunnel system, researchers uncovered long, winding passageways, dry stacked stone walls, and what Osmanagic described as megalithic stones with carved symbols and energy fields. But mainstream archaeologists were unconvinced. According to geologists and regional experts, the so-called pyramid is a natural formation known as a flatiron, a geological feature created by sedimentary layering and tectonic uplift. The angular appearance of the hill, they argue, is the result of natural fracturing, not human construction. The stone slabs, they say, are naturally occurring conglomerates, broken and weathered over time. No tools, inscriptions, or cultural artifacts have been definitively linked to an ancient civilization at the site. And yet, the questions remain. If Visochicha is purely natural, why does its orientation so closely match that of known pyramids? Why do the tunnels stretch in straight lines, branching at near right angles, unlike typical cave systems? What accounts for the reported acoustic properties in certain chambers, or the unusual electromagnetic readings captured by some researchers? Are these phenomena purely geological, or signs of human intent, long eroded from view? Some fringe theorists propose that the Bosnian pyramids were built by a lost civilization predating all known societies, perhaps tens of thousands of years ago, in the shadowy epochs before recorded history. Others link the site to ancient global networks of pyramid-building cultures, suggesting that knowledge, now forgotten, once spanned continents. There are even claims of unusual energies emanating from the peak of the Pyramid of the Sun. A focused beam of electromagnetic radiation, measured by independent teams, and left unexplained. What natural process, they ask, could produce such an effect? Still, no conclusive evidence has emerged. No ancient writings, no tools, no bones, no cultural debris that can be radiocarbon dated to a civilization capable of moving massive stone. And yet, tourists continue to arrive. Volunteers dig. And the hills remain silent, massive, and mysterious. What then do we make of this place? Is it a grand misinterpretation? Natural formations mistaken for ancient wonders, shaped by erosion and wishful thinking? Or is it a partially buried truth, obscured by time and academic rigidity, waiting to be uncovered by eyes willing to see beyond established timelines? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere between. It is possible that the Bosnian hills are natural, but modified in antiquity. That what we see today is a hybrid, a conversation between geology and human hands. A site whose true history has been layered over by millennia of growth, collapse, and silence. Or perhaps the mystery is psychological, a reflection of our desire to find meaning in the landscape, our yearning to connect with something ancient, something lost, something bigger than ourselves. But still, the shape of the hill is precise. The tunnels are real. The stone blocks remain. Whether natural, altered, or built by a hand now forgotten, they challenge us to ask, what are we willing to believe? And what are we afraid to consider? In the shadow of Visochica, where forest reclaims stone and wind, whispers through caverns of uncertain origin, we are left with more questions than answers. Were these truly pyramids, crafted by a civilization that rose and fell before history began? Or are they the product of time and earth, given meaning by our endless search for the extraordinary? And if they are ancient, who built them? And why did they leave no trace? From the verdant slopes of Visoko and the elusive symmetry of the Bosnian pyramids, we turn now to the waters, where memory lies sunken beneath the waves, and myth presses against the edge of archaeological possibility. Just off the western coast of India, in the Arabian Sea, divers and sonar scans have revealed structures that shouldn't be there. Stone walls, straight lines, right angles, buried beneath centuries of silt and sand. These submerged remains sit just off the coast of Gujarat, near the modern-day town of Dwarka. But long before sonar, long before science, this place was already a legend. This is the mystery of the submerged city of Dwarka, a city said to have been built by gods, lost to the ocean, and remembered in the verses of one of the world's oldest texts. According to ancient Hindu tradition, Dwarka was founded by Lord Krishna himself, a divine king, philosopher, and warrior. The Mahabharata and Harivamsa describe it in grand poetic terms, a golden city built on the western shore, with towering walls, opulent palaces, and a harbor bustling with trade. It was a marvel, a jewel of civilization. But after Krishna's departure from the world, the city is said to have been claimed by the sea, swallowed whole in a single night. For millennia, the story remained just that, a story. A sacred myth passed down in temples and texts, often interpreted as symbolic, spiritual, or purely allegorical. But in the early 2000s, that changed. Using sonar and satellite imaging, a team from India's National Institute of Ocean Technology began surveying the Gulf of Combat, far from the immediate shoreline. What they found astonished even the skeptics: submerged structures, geometrical, aligned, and extensive. Stone blocks arranged in straight rows, large platforms, wall-like formations, and what appeared to be the remains of a man-made grid. In some places, the structures stretched for kilometers. The initial enthusiasm was immediate. Could this be evidence of a real Dwarka? An ancient city remembered in India's sacred texts, preserved beneath the waves. Divers recovered artifacts, pottery shards, fossilized bones, and tools embedded in the seabed. Some were dated, controversially, to as early as 7,500 BC, thousands of years before the Indus Valley civilization, and far earlier than conventional timelines place complex society in the region. But the findings sparked debate. Many archaeologists cautioned restraint. They argued that the dating methods used were flawed or inconclusive. The structures, some said, could be natural formations, rock patterns sculpted by currents and geological activity. The artifacts, they argued, might have drifted from the coast or been disturbed by underwater currents, muddying any conclusions about their origin. And yet, the shapes remained, the alignments, the symmetry. Why do they resemble the outlines of streets, foundations, and enclosures? Why do they follow a clear pattern, suggesting design, not accident? If this is not Dwarka, what is it? And if it is, what does it say about the history of India? About the antiquity of civilization itself? The mainstream narrative holds that the Indus Valley civilization, which flourished between 2600 and 1900 BC, was the earliest example of urban planning in South Asia. Its cities, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, boasted organized grids, advanced drainage systems, and a high level of social organization. But if the submerged city in the Gulf of Combat truly dates back to 7,500 BC, it would push the emergence of civilization in the region back by more than 5,000 years, predating not only the Indus, but also the Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations. It would challenge the foundations of our historical model. Could there have been an advanced pre-Indus culture, perhaps even a Vedic society, that built cities, traded by sea, and passed down its memory through sacred texts? Some researchers, particularly in India, have suggested just that the Mahabharata and other ancient texts are not just literature, but layered records, history couched in epic form. They argue that if Krishna's Dwarka existed, it may have been a real place, remembered through oral tradition, and eventually written into scripture. Others caution against blurring the lines between myth and history. Without inscriptions, without definitive dating, without consistent stratigraphy, the evidence remains inconclusive. The city, if it existed, has left behind whispers, not declarations. But even whispers can be revealing. Why does the tradition of Dwarka persist so vividly? Why do local fishermen speak of submerged ruins, netting up carved stones and ancient pottery? Why does the city appear again and again in India's mythological and historical consciousness as a center of knowledge, power, and divine architecture? Could it be that memory of the city survived long after the sea took it, preserved through ritual, adapted through poetry, but rooted in a truth we have yet to fully uncover? Perhaps the submerged city near Gujarat is not Dwarka. Perhaps it is another settlement, lost in the fog of deep prehistory. Or perhaps it is both, a convergence of place and myth, where archaeology and memory are two sides of the same story. And if it is Dwarka, what else lies beneath the waves? What other civilizations, spoken of in sacred verses or dismissed as legend, might yet be hidden beneath oceans, lakes, and shifting coasts? As we peer into the waters off India's western shore, where sonar pings against submerged stone and divers descend into ancient silence, we are left with a question that echoes deeper than the sea. Was Dwarka a city built by gods? Or was it a city built by humans, long before we believed they could? From the drowned memory of Dwarka, where myth may yet meet sunken stone, we travel inland, into the green heart of France. Not to a temple, nor to a city, but to a quiet pasture in the Auvergne countryside. A place no one expected to hold a secret. And yet, buried beneath its soil, something was found. Something that has puzzled, divided, and stirred controversy for nearly a century. This is the mystery of the Glosel tablets, and the question of who, if anyone, truly created them. It was March of 1924. A teenage farmer named Émile Fradin was plowing the fields with his grandfather near the hamlet of Glosel when the earth gave way beneath their cart. They uncovered a stone-lined chamber filled with clay tablets, bones, carved stones, and ceramic vessels. Over the following months, hundreds of artifacts would be unearthed from the site. Tablets inscribed with strange symbols, undeciphered scripts, and stylized carvings of animals and human figures. Some hauntingly primitive, others unexpectedly refined. At first, the discovery was hailed as extraordinary. But almost immediately, questions began to arise. What were these objects? To what time period did they belong? And most importantly, were they genuine? The symbols on the Glosel tablets didn't match any known writing system. Some vaguely resembled Phoenician, others Etruscan, and still others seemed like early forms of runes. Yet they existed side by side with artifacts that appeared to be Neolithic or Iron Age in origin. Radiocarbon dating, where it was eventually applied, offered dates ranging from 300 BC to the early Middle Ages. But the interpretations were inconsistent, and some questioned the methods used. The controversy deepened. French archaeologists and epigraphers were sharply divided. Some, like Dr. Antonin Morlet, defended the site and its authenticity. Others accused Fradin and his supporters of fraud, suggesting the artifacts were forgeries, elaborate hoaxes created to gain fame or profit. Fradin, just a teenager when the site was uncovered, maintained his innocence until his death decades later. Legal battles followed. Accusations flew. The French Academy of Inscriptions and Belles-Lettres declared the site a fabrication in the 1920s, yet no definitive proof of forgery was ever produced. Over the decades, scientific interest in Glosel would rise and fall in waves, each new analysis bringing more questions than answers. But the mystery remained. What are the Glosel tablets? And if they are genuine, who carved them? One theory suggests that the tablets are remnants of a lost proto-writing system, an early European script that predates the known alphabets of the region. If so, the Glozell site could represent an isolated cultural pocket, preserving a symbolic tradition long forgotten elsewhere. But why does the writing bear elements from such a wide range of known scripts? Is this evidence of trade, influence, or retroactive invention? Some fringe theorists have proposed that the Glozell tablets are the remnants of a forgotten European civilization, perhaps a lost culture that once bridged the Neolithic and Bronze Age transitions in Western Europe. Could these artifacts be echoes of a society that was later displaced by the migrations of Celts, Romans, and Goths, its legacy erased from the historical record? Others have gone further still, suggesting the symbols are not linguistic at all, but ceremonial, used in rites, magic, or prehistoric record-keeping beyond our deciphering. If so, the writing may not be meant to communicate in the way we expect, but to encode belief, identity, or cosmology. Yet the tablets still defy classification. Despite being studied by experts in epigraphy, archaeology, and linguistics, no one has conclusively decoded the Glozell script. No one has found a matching inscription elsewhere. No clear link ties the site to any known ancient culture. And perhaps that is what fuels the fascination. In a world where most archaeological discoveries can be categorized, contextualized, and catalogued, the Glozell tablets remain stubbornly outside the margins. They do not fit the narrative. They challenge our assumptions, not just about European prehistory, but about the process of historical memory itself. Were the artifacts forged, as some claim, elaborate reconstructions of multiple ancient styles designed to deceive? If so, it would have required not only talent and knowledge, but a level of artistic and archaeological sophistication that seems unlikely for a teenage farmer in rural France. Or, are they real? Genuine artifacts of an undocumented culture, preserved beneath centuries of soil, only to be dismissed because they did not match what we expected to find? Even today, the site at Glozell remains contested ground. Some archaeologists quietly continue their investigations. Others avoid the subject entirely, wary of the academic firestorm that once surrounded it. Yet the questions persist. If the Glozell tablets are genuine, what civilization made them? What knowledge was encoded in their script? And why has no trace of their builders been found elsewhere? Like the strange figures of the Vinca or the undeciphered glyphs of the Indus, the Glozell tablets whisper from a deep silence, an artifact of unknown hands in a language we do not speak, pointing to a past that may never have been written down at all. What else might lie beneath quiet fields and ordinary hillsides, waiting to be uncovered, misunderstood, or forgotten again? And what do we risk missing if we refuse to look beyond what we already believe? As the last fragments of the Glozell tablets fade into the dust of a disputed past, we drift into a stranger territory, one where the boundary between myth, invention, and lost memory becomes increasingly blurred. A place not found in textbooks or ruins, but in the deep subconscious of cultural storytelling, half dream, half revelation. This is the mystery of the children of Ubo-Sathla. It begins, curiously enough, not with an archaeological dig or a whispered folktale, but with a name, Ubo-Sathla, first appearing in the strange brooding fiction of Clark Ashton Smith, one of the key figures of early 20th century cosmic horror. In his writings, Ubo-Sathla is not a god, nor a creature in the usual sense, but a protoplasmic origin, a formless entity from which all life on Earth supposedly descended. It is ancient, shapeless, and dormant beneath the world's surface, guarding the primeval tablets of stone, artifacts that supposedly contain the secrets of forgotten aeons and civilizations long buried by time and memory. To most, it's fiction, Lovecraftian, obscure, unsettling. And yet, something about it lingers. Were these traditions merely poetic representations of the unknown? Or were they distorted recollections, fragments of cultural memory pass through generations, from a time when early humanity still stood on the edge of the incomprehensible. Some speculative theorists suggest that the children of Ubo-Sathla, as an archetype, represent an entirely lost phase of human or even pre-human civilization. Not in the literal form of monsters or gods, but as symbolic ancestors of consciousness itself. A phase when language, logic, and identity had not yet crystallized, when the world was seen through a lens we no longer possess, when the line between the material and immaterial was still shifting. In remote cave systems around the world, from the painted caverns of southern France to the spiraled rock art of Australia, we see strange shapes, blobs, spirals, undulating forms that do not represent animals, people, or gods. They seem instead to depict states of being, patterns, sensations. Could these be the last visual remnants of that fluid consciousness? Recordings not of the world, but of the inner world. The world of the children of Ubo-Sathla. Some researchers have connected this idea to the sudden appearance of symbols in the archaeological record. The leap from handprints to abstract ideograms, from soundless marks to sacred scripts. What if these symbols were not just functional inventions, but attempts to anchor a dissolving memory of a world before boundaries, before language locked us into separation? And then there is the question of the primeval tablets, mentioned in the myth of Ubo-Sathla. Smith described them as ancient, unknowable slabs, predating all known writing, locked beneath the earth. In the real world, the motif of hidden, pre-human knowledge recurs again and again, from the emerald tablet of Hermes Trismegistus to the lost books of Thoth, from the cursed tablets of Mesopotamian legend to the forbidden tomes of Gnostic cosmology. In every case, knowledge buried, knowledge too old, too dangerous, or too transformative to be preserved. What could these stories mean? Are they cautionary tales, echoes of lost civilizations, or are they symbolic of a different kind of fall, one not from paradise, but from unity? From a time when the world was not yet divided into object and subject, into self and other. Of course, there is no hard evidence for the children of Ubo-Sathla. No skeletal remains, no ruins, no written records. But then, perhaps that is the point. They are not a civilization in the traditional sense, with cities and stone. They are something else, a possibility that slips between cracks in our history. A presence that once was, but never spoke. A forgotten stage of human experience, too fluid to be preserved, too alien to be understood. And yet, something remains, in our stories, in our symbols, in the places where language breaks down and the oldest myths begin. Were the children of Ubo-Sathla real? Or are they the shadows cast by our own forgotten origins, a memory so deep, so foreign, that only fiction dares to name it? And if they were real, what else sleeps beneath the surface of our world, beneath the surface of ourselves, still waiting, still silent, still shaping what we do not yet understand?